Erica Blitman, and I'm here. James Birch,
Present.
Paul Hilding,
Here.
Rod Wickstrom,
Here.
Trevor Brown,
Here.
Doug Exton,
Here.
and Jeremy Roush.
Here.
Thank you very much. There was an interest in moving the unfinished business to the end of the agenda, and so if there's a motion from one of the commissioners to reorganize our agenda so that we can have that item, which is going to require some more discussion at the end. If there's a motion for that, I'll entertain that.
I will move the unfinished business to the end of the meeting.
There's been a moved and seconded to move the unfinished business to the end of the meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll go ahead and reorganize the agenda a little bit to move that unfinished business. The first item for new business is project number 2021-00138, CU MSP. And I'll go ahead and look for Mr. Lindstrom.
Just a second here, let me get this pulled up.
While he's pulling that up, I'll go ahead and remind people that when we get to the public testimony portion, we're going to limit public testimony to 3 minutes per person, and the applicant will have, I think, 10 minutes at their original, 15 minutes at the original application, and then 5 minutes for the rebuttal. Thank you.
Madam Chair, it looks like the applicant for this hearing item is not yet online with us. He's going to be joining us online. If you wish to move things around, you can. He may or may not join us. Let's hope he does, but just keep that in mind. I can start if you'd like, but if you have questions for him, then he might not be here to answer.
Well, and I think I'll open it just for a quick discussion with the commissioners. If somebody wants to rearrange the agenda, I'd be willing to accept that kind of a motion.
I just got the applicant online.
Oh.
Okay. So we'll go with
Okay.
the order of business as it was.
I'll continue then. Okay. My ducks in a row here. So before you, we have application 2021-00138 CU MSP. This is a conditional use and master site plan application for John Hawker. Sorry for the blurry image. I apologize, but hopefully in your package you can see a better aerial. So this is an application for a conditional use and master site plan to operate a winery. There's going to be 3,600 square feet of a proposed 4,800 square foot building that will be built on the property and used for winery operations, workshop, meeting room, equipment storage, and a patio with an outdoor kitchen area. Grapes are also grown on the property currently. The property is located at 2924 West Deerfield Court, Eagle, and it contains 5.06 acres within the RUT zoning district in Section 31, Township 5 North, Range 1 East. So the property currently is being used to grow grapes. There are four vineyards currently on the property here on the master site plan. There's one in the front, and you have 3 back here. So the property also currently has agricultural exemption to allow for the growing of these grapes. So commercial production of the grapes on the property is being proposed to create wine by the applicant. As I mentioned, the operations will take place in that proposed structure that is right here labeled as number 10. 2 to 4 employees will be on site at any given time to produce wine within that structure. There will be no tasting room on the property, and only operations personnel will be allowed on site. A landscaping and screening plan was stamped by a licensed landscape professional and meets the requirements of the Ada County Code. The required parking spaces have been provided on the site plan as well, just to the northwest of the proposed structure here. The natural features analysis indicated that the use will not be a detriment to the natural features on the site. This property is located within Eagle's area of city impacts, and the future land use map for Eagle, as adopted by Ada County, designates the site as residential rural, which is primarily intended for single-family residential developments on large acreages, which may be in transition from ag to residential use, or may combine small-scale agricultural uses with residential uses. As a proposed application will combine a small-scale agricultural use with the existing residential use on the property, it is compatible with the adopted land use map. Here is just some photos that I took from the road, arrow pointing to where that building is going to be. Here on the right, you can see the existing dwelling on the property. And then here is your zoning map. Shows the property is zoned as RUT. Pretty much everything around it is also that similar RUT zoning. And so I did not receive any agency opposition. Central District Health, ACHD approved. You did have letters that you might have seen in the exhibits of neighbors that were in opposition. A few of the things that were noted were traffic issues, potential noise, activity, and then just a general precedent that this will set for future commercial uses. It sounds like the HOA and CCNRs is what a lot of the folks brought up. I will note that Ada County Development Services does not enforce CCNRs. I'm just wanting you to be aware of that. And then, once again, no tastings or events are permitted with this application. If they did wish to do that in the future, they'd have to come back with a new application. 4 employees allowed at the most, and then staff is recommending approval of this application, and I'll stand for any questions.
Commissioners, what questions do we have? Go ahead, Commissioner Roush.
Mr. Lindstrom, I just had a question regarding condition 13. It appears as if suitable, it just ends at suitable and adequate soil, oil/sediment. I don't know if that's, is that supposed to, is there, I mean, it looks like it might have been part of it deleted, but, or can you elaborate as to what that condition is requiring?
So this would be, Madam Chair, Commissioner Roush, this would be a term of approval, something that would need to take place in perpetuity. It does look like that got deleted there, something happened. I can, find out what was going on there, but yeah, it looks like it's just a protection measure to make sure that no spills take place, any chemicals, anything like that. So that is an error, it looks like, by staff, and we can make sure that gets updated. Good catch, thank you.
And thank you. Maybe if we could have that by the end of the hearing, we can include it in our motion.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lindstrom, just 2 quick ones. You mentioned there was going to be a limit of 4 employees. Is that part of the condition?
Yeah, so, Madam Chair, Commissioner Wickstrom, yeah, so that is part of the findings of facts. You'll see in the findings there is not a specific condition that limits that, but it is in the findings. So if you did, and it's also part of the master site plan. So if you did wish to make that a condition of approval, that sticks to 4, you can do so. And the two parking spaces will also gauge how many employees will be allowed. If there are additional employees that want to take part of this in the future, more parking would need to be added, and therefore a new master site plan. So it's up to you if you'd like to add an additional condition.
I was just thinking during the harvest, he wants to get that in pretty quick, and he may have more than 2 or 4 employees out there. The other part, there's really no clear definition of a small-scale ag use. What is your opinion of it? At what point do you get to the commercial side of things?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Wickstrom, so that small-scale ag use, I believe that was part of our long-range planners' interpretation of what this use is. This is a rural-urban transition zone, and therefore, because this application, this winery is a conditional use within that zone, we could look at it as more of a residential or ag use versus commercial that would be allowed more in a higher density or commercial zone. So I don't know if that specifically answers your question. I can give you the definition for a winery, though. It's an establishment for the manufacturing or bottling of wine, which may include tasting room, barrel rooms, bottling rooms, tank rooms, laboratories, sale of wine, and then processing structures and offices. So the applicant has been growing grapes on the property and did not need any kind of application to do that. He has ag exemption, but because of this processing structure that he's looking to build, that's why the need for the conditional use.
Right. Do you feel like just when you get to the side of processing, as opposed to raising or growing, raising cows or growing a crop, and you start processing, that you start to move into a commercial area? Do you think that would be the case?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Wickstrom, I mean, if that's how you see it, this is more a commercial use, then, yeah.
I'm trying to get your opinion too, just what
I'm
staff's
just,
view of this?
I have to be more black and white, so based on what we see, that this is a small-scale agricultural use.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any additional questions from the commissioners? Any questions? I had a question. When does the time, when we look at what the building looks like and say that it doesn't meet the character of the particular subdivision?
So, Madam Chair, so HOAs and CCNRs, they might have specific design standards for buildings, so I'm not sure what that is in this case. They might have to go through a review with an HOA. As far as building code goes, after this, let's say this application is approved, it's a condition of approval that they get a building permit and zoning certificate with our office. So the building division would step in, look over the plans that are submitted and make sure that they meet the building code. As far as design specifics, I'm not really sure exactly what is handled in the building code. I believe that's more, with specific neighborhoods and HOAs that is addressed.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, if this property were to be sold, does the conditional use permit stay with the property or does it stay with the person?
Madam Chair, it is site-specific, so it does stay with the property. It could change hands. The conditional use and master site plan would still stay intact unless they were to add something additional to the property.
Just to clarify, if the conditions that are added during this hearing would become site-specific, you couldn't transfer it to somebody else and could have them apply?
Madam Chair, no, it would be site-specific just for this property, this use only. It would not, the neighbor next door, they could come in for a new application the next day and do the same thing, and you would have new conditions that you could add or remove. The specific use standards, though, would be the same for a winery.
Okay. And one more question. I thank you very much for letting me ask these questions. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just.
Okay,
thought of
go
something.
ahead. When I think about the noise ordinances that we've had before us, there's been a tight deadline when you can start and stop, but that doesn't work very well with a winery. So tell us how this fits in the noise ordinance.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, there are no specific use standards as far as wineries go for the noise. We would more so look at what our overall Ada County ordinance says. The 7 to 10 cutoff for noise would have to be followed. As to what, I don't know how noise is qualified or quantified, but that would be more of a code enforcement issue, and they would have to go out there and take measurements or something to see if there was noise. So if you wanted to cut the hours, you could as a condition, but there are no specific conditions that say the use has to stop at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. We would look at the 7 to 10 noise ordinance, make sure that they're following that.
Okay, thank you. One
I
more
did just,
question.
I noticed that reading the rebuttal from the applicant that the homeowner association, all that is, he said there was zero, they didn't have a problem. I didn't see in the paperwork, is there anything was submitted from the homeowner association, either approving or denying, what their opinion, good or bad on this?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Brown, I did not see a letter. So there was a letter that looked like it came from the HOA as a whole, and there were multiple folks that signed off on that that letter. I don't know if that specifically was from the HOA itself or somebody just slapped
On the
the
HOA, yeah.
HOA name on there, but maybe we can ask the applicant that,
Right.
he can address that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Any more questions from the commissioners? We appreciate the engagement and the questions. So we'll go ahead and call the applicant, and I guess the applicant is online. If you'll state your name and address for the record, that would be great.
My name is John Hawker, and my address is 2924 West Deerfield Court. Can everyone hear me?
We can, it's a little low, so if you could speak up or get closer to the mic, that would be helpful for us.
Okay, how about this?
That's better.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Commissioner. I'd like to respond to some of the questions that you and the other commissioners have asked. In terms of the commercial use, in regards to business, the sales, tasting room, all of that would never be on this property. This area here, this winery would probably be best classified as a hobby winery. Maximum production would be maybe 300 cases, and that'd be several years out. It will never be more than that. It will never do anything other than produce the wine from the grapes that are grown on the property. Someone had asked about the HOA building requirements. The building does have to go through the architectural committee. I have contracted an architect, and I'm waiting on a quote for them to do the project. But the results of that would be submitted to the HOA for approval before submitting for a building permit. Let's see, so you had mentioned noise. One of the commissioners had asked a question about noise. The only real machinery associated with a winery is the bottling line and the crusher destemmer, and pretty much all of that will happen indoors with the doors closed. So there's very little noise that would ever get outside the building. And Madam Commissioner, I believe you asked about who was the author of the letter from the HOA. The author is someone named Mrs. Suku. I've been told, I've never met this person, and this person is not listed as a member of the HOA. I've been told that she is the daughter of one of the homeowners, but I'm not clear as to who is the actual homeowner. She is the one who wrote the letter. So this letter occurred outside of the HOA. The HOA itself did not write this letter. In addition, it's the commercial aspect of objections that have been raised. Essentially, as I said earlier, the commercial aspects of it would be someplace else. I intend to establish a tasting room that's in the city of Eagle, and all of the commercial aspects, the business aspects, sales, etc., would occur there. Nothing will occur on the property. There's no meetings, no events, nothing like that will occur there on the property. That's pretty much it as far as addressing the questions, unless you have something or something specific you'd like to ask.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to give the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions if they'd like at this time. Any questions from the commissioners? Any questions from the commissioners? Okay. Commissioner Roush has a question.
Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Hawker, so you'd stated that there would be no retail sales, maximum production of 300 cases, and no customers, no large events or customers. That was a mixture of your statements this evening and in the letter dated July 7th. Are those conditions of approval that you would be acceptable to you?
Absolutely. Yes, I have no problem with that. I have no intent to have any public events of any kind, no public customers of any kind on the property.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? So I'm not seeing any more questions. If you could stay on the line, we're going to listen to some more testimony, and then we'll come back at the end for your rebuttal. Thank you. I'm going to call for public testimony, and the first person on my list is Bruce Richardson, and it says that you'll be on WebEx, and you'll have 3 minutes. I know you can't see the signal, so I'm going to be rude and interrupt you in the middle of your talk if you go over the 3 minutes. So we'll all work together on this. So Bruce, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself and your address, that would be great.
My name is Bruce Richardson. I live at 3171 West Deerfield Court on Eagle Road. This is the street of the proposed winery. Now to start?
Go ahead.
All right. I'm in opposition to building a wine processing center in the middle of this residential neighborhood. Buckhorn Estates is a subdivision of 5-acre lots with single-family residential homes. This is a proposal to build a 4,800 square foot wine processing facility. Is an industrial commercial business, doesn't belong in our neighborhood. You have a letter that opposes the winery construction. It comes from the residents of Buckhorn Estates. I wrote that letter. It was sent out by the neighbor's daughter who was visiting. She just sent it out to the neighborhood. It has 37 names attached, and then there's a bunch or several individual letters that are also opposed to it. I wrote this letter to our HOA president on July 6th. We have started going out in the subdivision to get the neighbors' feel for this project. And so forth. 28 people signed the letter opposing the project. 2 took the letter wanting to study it further, and 1 person said he would not sign it. Clearly, our neighborhood does not want such commercialization to happen among our homes. As said, Buckhorn Estate Subdivision is RUT and allows for small agricultural uses, and that's been brought up in our HOA. Isn't this winery like raising some beef cattle or raising hay? The difference is the growing of grapes fits this definition of a small scale agricultural use, like my raising 2 steers. But I don't have a meat packing facility in my backyard, and neither do my neighbors. The wine processing center is like having a meat packing facility in the neighborhood. Doesn't belong. That's commercialization. That goes along with this definition of small-scale agricultural use. The growing of grapes is fine, but when you go to building the wine processing center, it goes to commercialization. And that doesn't belong in our residential neighborhood, and we ask that this be denied. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What questions do the commissioners have for Mr. Richardson? Mr. Birch, Commissioner Birch.
Mr. Richardson, there's been a lot of discussion about the character of the particular neighborhood here. Can you help us understand a little bit more about the character? For example, what are the average lot sizes of the homes in the Buckhorn subdivision? Are there any other commercial uses in the Buckhorn subdivision? Do the roads in the Buckhorn subdivision primarily run east-west, north-south, or do they meander around and end in cul-de-sacs? Describe the character of Buckhorn Estates to us, will you? He has left the room.
Yeah, I don't know if he was not able to hear. We had a technology issue. I think we might hold that question. Oh, there he is.
Can you hear me?
We can.
I can't hear you.
Battery 100%.
Can you hear me now?
Connected to. Yes.
Can you hear us talking? He can see us talking. Now we
I can hear you. Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Birch had a question for you, and I'm going to have him repeat it.
If I can.
Yeah.
Mr. Richardson, there's been a lot of discussion about the character of Buckhorn Estates. And so I'm asking you to describe that character in more detail. Tell us about the average lot size in Buckhorn Estates. Tell us whether or not there's any other commercial developments there. Tell us what you understand to be the average value of the homes there. Tell us whether or not the streets in Buckhorn Estates run true north, south, east, west, or are they curving, meandering streets that end in cul-de-sacs? What is Buckhorn Estates like?
The streets are curved. They end in cul-de-sacs. That's what that. Buckhorn Estates is just over all of them are just over 5-acre parcels. A lot of people have some horses. Some have cattle. Few have a couple of each. So that kind of sets, we have a lot of those with pastures there. And I'm trying to remember the rest of the question you were asking now.
Are there any other commercial developments there?
We don't have any commercial developments that are like this at all. This is a totally new thing.
I have no further questions.
No further questions. Any other questions from the commissioners?
Yes, Mr. Richardson, can you tell us how many homes are within the HOA?
80 some homes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Richardson, do you know, is there any other any other homes in the subdivision out of those 80 homes that have large shops that are apart from the homes? You know, say for storing RVs or, you know, ATVs or anything like that, or whatever their uses are of a large shop area. Usually people that purchase these kind of lots are buying it to have accessory units outside of their home to work in.
Most people have an accessory building. They do. Nobody has an outbuilding of 4,800 square feet. Nobody. There's one that's fairly large that kind of, I don't know how big it is, but it's not that big. I talked to them about how big theirs was, but make a short answer, no, there's none. This would be by far the largest outbuilding in the subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Hilding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Richardson, are you aware, it's already been commented that we are not empowered to enforce HOA regulations or CC&Rs. Are you aware, however, whether there is such a restriction, there is a restriction that's applicable here in your CC&Rs?
It's very gray. It depends on your perspective of how you read it. There is one subtitle in the CC&Rs that says no commercial business. But then under that, it gives the example more of cattle, that you can't have a large herd of cattle and have like a feedlot. So it's gray, this area. It doesn't address something quite like this. So the HOA in our meeting brought that to everybody's attention, and they are undergoing a process to rewrite that to address this gray area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? Thank you very much, Mr. Richardson, for your testimony today. Our next person on my list is WebEx, Melanie Johnson.
Hello.
Hello. We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Commissioner.
If you would go ahead and give us your name and address, and then give us your testimony.
Melanie Johnson, 2924 West Deerfield Court, Eagle, Idaho. In response to Mr. Richardson's testimony, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that on the two streets in the subdivision, Deerfield and Croft, Almost every single property has an outbuilding and or a barn. I understand that the 4,800 square foot proposal for this outbuilding will be only 1 story above ground. In other words, half of it will be below ground, and that it's designed to not be intrusive to any of the neighborhood aesthetic. I'd also like to draw your attention that on both of those streets, numerous residents sell their eggs, their beef, their orchard and garden fruit. There's a landscaper that is a commercial building on that street. There's a construction company on the corner. There are car parts where cars are parted and, dozens of cars are parked on their lot. There's a semi-truck repairman. There's a wedding venue. There's horseback riding lessons. Alfalfa and hay are grown and sold. So no, there's no meat packing. And just like there's no meat packing, there's not going to be any public sale of the wine at John Hawker's Hobby Vineyard. There was a meeting on May 1st where all the neighbors were invited. Mr. Richardson did not attend. Of the 2 to 4 people permitted to work, John and his wife are 2 of the people. It really is a hobby vineyard. The HOA will have to approve their outbuilding. And I want to call attention to the question earlier about how the streets run. Croft runs north and south, ending in a cul-de-sac, and Deerfield runs east and west, ending in a cul-de-sac. Lastly, I'd like to say that the Richardsons live 1,054 feet away from the property. That's more than 3 football field lengths. They can't see it, they can't hear it, and they'll never be bothered by this hobby, just like they're not bothered by the cows, horses, eggs, landscaper, and all those other people who have their small businesses on their property. Any questions? Oh, one more thing. The lady who wrote that letter that was undated, her name is Catherine Ray Sukhu. She doesn't live in Buckhorn Estates or even in Idaho. She's an attorney from Wilmington, Delaware. So I believe she has no standing in this hearing.
So thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony. What questions do the commissioners have for Ms. Johnson? Any questions? Any questions? Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate you taking time to come on today. The next person on our list is Roger Shaver, and it sounds like he's on WebEx. If you could give us your name and address, that would be great.
Yes, hello, I'm Roger Shaver. I'm at 3172 West Deerfield Court, which is also on the street involved. My daughter helped write the letter on her computer because she was handy. The letter wasn't signed by my daughter. It went out on her email. It was signed by my wife and I and the Richardsons. So she does not have standing maybe, but she didn't send the letter. The vast majority of people we've been able to talk to, more than 90%, are opposed to this. Our HOA president was out of town until this Monday, so we weren't able to get him involved. The other 2 board members, one is the secretary treasurer, she's in opposition, and the water master, he's also in opposition. This is a commercial activity. They're buying bottles, they're shipping them in, they're going to use their grapes for the most part, as far as we know. They're going to have 300 cases of wine to be sold. They're going to have employees, they're going to have traffic of them coming in and out. We are affected by the landscaper. The HOA sent him a letter telling him he was in violation, and it hasn't gone beyond that. His truck are stored outside, there's no building involved. They're parked behind his house and they're not very visible, but they do come and go with several employees to his trucks, and then they leave and then they come back in the afternoon. So we're not happy with that, and the majority of people are also against that. It's true, perhaps, that this meets the staff approval stamp, but it shouldn't meet the commissioner's approval stamp, because the nature of this quiet, single-family home neighborhood will be changed as these commercial things come in. You open the door for, a horse arena with a rodeo like they have to the north of us on Hazen, or a commercial wedding place that would be allowed over there, and we hear their noise and music. So when you change the precedent like this, you're opening a Pandora's box. Buckhorn Estate founders and in the CCNRs, they clearly do not want commercial activities in here. They want a single-family residence with a group of families in a community. I urge you to not give this conditional approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Any questions from the commissioners? I'm not seeing any questions, so thank you very much for your testimony tonight. The next person on the list is Jean Richardson. If you'll give us your name and address.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. My name is Jean Richardson. I live in 3171 West Deerfield. And before I start, could I correct my husband? There's 49 houses, not 80. I don't know when he got that. And the homes over about 1.5 million, 2 million. That's what Zillow tells us nowadays. But anyway, I'm starting. Okay, so I want you to imagine there's about 50 people standing in front of you where you are. And that represents the neighbors that signed that letter against this permit. These were my neighbors. We went around the subdivision and we talked to them. And we emailed you that letter with the signatures expressing our concerns. And we emailed that on July 8th. And since that time, more neighbors have come to us and expressed their concerns. And about 90% of the people that we talked to are against it. When I first heard that Mr. Harker was going to do a winery, I did not think much about it. But the more we started thinking about it and the long-term ramifications, we became very opposed. The conditional use permit would allow Mr. Harker to change our single-family residential subdivision to house a 4,800 square foot commercial processing facility. That building is 5.5 times bigger than my barn. In fact, it's bigger than my house. And in fact, it's bigger, according to Zillow, Mr. Harker's house. And the commercial facility change not only endangers the integrity of our present neighborhood, but it sets a bad precedence for our future neighborhood. Those moving in may think that they can further industrialize our neighborhood. We only have Mr. Harker's word that he won't do events, but he has things planned that could. It is set up, but if he sells his house, we have no control over the next owner. And they could start doing events. They could take in grapes from other areas of our subdivision for process. So I asked that the Ada County Board deny Mr. Harker's request for a conditional use permit that would allow this commercial processing facility. It would change forever the single family residential neighborhood that I moved into 21 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Richardson? No questions? Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. The next person on the list is Mike Turner, and it looks like he's in the room. So if you want to come forward and give us your testimony and give us your name and address, that would be great.
My name is Mike Turner. I live at 2738 West Deerfield Court. There's just 2 houses south of this proposed thing. I'm so opposed against this. This area is a urban, rural urban area. This is not a commercial production facility areas. This is a rural subdivision. The name of the subdivision is Buckhorn Estates Subdivision, not commercial, not production of wine. I don't care, production of anything. It should not be allowed. I've lived there for 25 years. I helped build the subdivision. There was no way that the developer had envisioned any commercial work in this area. This was supposed to be a subdivision for 5-acre lots. And that's what it is. Until you guys, if you decide to approve this, then it becomes not a 5-acre lot subdivision. It becomes who knows what. It could be, and we do have a problem. We do have some used cars or pickups that just showed up in the last month. And for demolishing their business. And I think we'll put a kibosh to that. That's, have a bunch of junk pickups sitting around. But nevertheless, this thing is just ridiculous to even think that you would allow that this be put into a rural, nice subdivision. The housing market, the housing prices is $1.5 million plus. If this thing becomes in, then the prices of our lots and our houses and our dreams have definitely decreased by a bunch. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Another thing, he says he's only going to use the grapes from the farm for this. That is an impossibility. There's 3 acres of grapes, and he will never get to the point where he can raise enough grapes on that to make 300 cases of wine. He was going to have to start importing, and so that means agriculture trucks coming into our subdivision and having fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. If you'll hold on for a second, there might be some questions from the commissioners. Any questions from the commissioners? So thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it. The next person I'm going to call is Arita Turner.
He already talked.
Okay, so he talked for
I'm
you.
just saying that we live on a cul-de-sac, and we're only 2 houses from him. And so people would go around.
If you would please come up to the mic and give us your name and address, and then just give us your statement, that would be awesome. We'll make it easy for you.
Okay.
But just give us your name and address, and then give us your brief statement.
My name is Arita Turner, and I live at 2738 West Deerfield Court. I love where we live. It's beautiful, and we live on a cul-de-sac, and they are only 2 houses from us. We have families, we have children, and to have that is commercial. It disappoints me that somebody can come in and not read their CC&Rs, which you don't care about, but he still outdoes himself, and now we have to fight for our homes. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Any
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much for coming and giving your testimony. Is there anybody else in the courtroom or online who would like to provide public testimony for this project? So I don't see any other testimony. We might have some questions for the staff, and then we'll go back to the applicant. So Mr. Lindstrom, do you have a recommendation for us in terms of the wording that needs to be finished?
Madam Chair, I do. So
Okay.
that term of approval number 13 can be removed altogether. That was from the pest control business application that you know about. That should have been removed. Thank you. So whatever your motion is, you can include that condition 13 be removed from the conditions of approval.
Okay, and if the commissioners wanted to limit the establishment, to 4 employees, that would be something that we could write in as an additional
Absolutely.
condition.
Yep.
What other questions do the commissioners have?
I was just wondering, just as clarification, can we as the commission also add a condition to not allow any public access or events to the wine production components of the?
Chair, Commissioner Exton, you are more than welcome to do so. Yep.
What other questions do the commissioners have? Okay, Mr. Lindstrom, I think you've answered all of our questions, and we'll go back to the applicant for 5 minutes of rebuttal.
Yes, I won't need 5 minutes. One of the comments has been about the commercial.
Excuse me, could you speak up louder or get closer to the mic?
Okay, how is this?
Better, thank you.
Is that better? Okay. Addressing the no commercial operations that have been referenced in the CCNRs, I have sent a copy of the CCNRs to you for your review. The paragraph that deals with no commercial operations talks specifically about livestock and only livestock. The CCNRs were written over 30 years ago, and so I'm not clear as to what they actually meant, other than they were thinking specifically to livestock. Someone mentioned the property values. Adding an outbuilding would obviously increase the property values, not the actual winery itself. Nothing is mounted or fixed, so if I sold the property, all the winery equipment leaves with me. So there's nothing, it's just another building that's out there. Someone mentioned about how I would have to import grapes just to get 300 cases. That is that's not true. There's an acre and a quarter of 4 varietals, and that will at maximum yield in maybe 3 or 4 years might reach 300 cases. Typical yield is roughly a ton per acre. So, excuse me, it's roughly 4 tons per acre. So, and a ton would produce 50 cases in general terms. Someone had asked about the size of outbuildings. There are several outbuildings there, and some places have one large outbuilding, such as a barn. Others have 2 or 3 outbuildings. Not sure of the sizes. Many of them look quite big, at least 1,600 square feet. So 2,400 square foot footprint for my outbuilding doesn't seem excessive. In addition, I think the maximum square footage by buildings for this property is 11,000 square feet. And with a 4,800 square foot building plus my 2,700 square foot residence, we're just over 50% of that allowance. Building is going to be set below grade into the side of a hill. It's shielded by trees on literally all 4 sides. You won't see it from the street. The neighbor next door to us on our north, it probably would be able to see the upper half of the top floor. And even that would be obstructed by trees that are on his property. So the big issue that I can see is it's a quote unquote commercial operation. And that seems to be the heartache with this. And yet it's something that nobody sees, nobody knows, literally is going to know that it's there other than we're having this hearing. Everything would occur inside the building. There's no noise. Would be no traffic, at least minimal traffic, a couple of deliveries a year, that type of thing. General purposes, it's designed specifically to be unobtrusive in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions that weren't answered?
Yes, Madam
You have a
Commissioner.
question, Commissioner?
Yes. So I know you mentioned that the design will have to go through the HOA architectural board. Do you think, given the opposition, that they would be inclined to approve a design from you for this structure, if this is approved?
Based on what is in the CCNRs as far as design approvals, it's the exterior is basically got to look like everything that's around it. And that would be part of my requirements to the architect, is to make it as unobtrusive as possible, to blend in as much as possible.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, thank you very much for providing your testimony. We're going to close the public hearing and let the commissioners discuss, or we'd like to have a motion on the floor before we start discussion. So is anybody prepared with that? I see Commissioner Roush writing lots of notes.
Madam Chair, I move to approve item number 2021-00138-CU-MSP based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report and the testimony from tonight's hearings, subject to the conditions of approval as attached as Exhibit A with the following changes. Number 13 is struck. Number 21, condition number 21 is added to limit the production to no more or not to exceed 300 cases, no retail sales, and no hosting of private events, and not to exceed 4 employees.
So thank you. And I'm assuming you meant 300 cases annually.
Yes.
Okay. So is there in the second for that motion?
Second.
There's been a second for that motion. And so now the commissioners can have some discussion. Do you want to discuss your reason for the motion?
Madam Chair, thank you. Certainly, this is a tricky situation with the use, the proposed use, small agricultural use, and associated uses with small agriculture. It's we're not the authority for the CCNRs. That's a private contractual agreement that has to be enforced as such and isn't under our purview. And I do see this use being in compliance with the rural-urban transition. So that was the reason for my motion. Thank you.
Is there a reason? Would you like to comment, Commissioner Brown?
Yeah, I would say this is the toughest one I've seen so far, as far as my own personal opinion on it. Definitely was leaning a certain way and pulled back and forth by the testimony, so I appreciate all the testimony. I definitely think that pulled me towards the middle more on this. I guess my situation is we have certain rules that we can, what we can do on our own property. We obviously don't want to affect our neighbors in a negative way, but we also can't step outside of that and tell people what to do on property that they use their money to purchase and have their own life on. I know it's hard to dictate. I personally have a neighbor that works on motorcycles in his garage with his kids at all hours of the night, and I would love to, I could call call the code enforcement on it or whatever we have to do, but it's something he does on his own property inside his own, and he shuts down within the hours. I think as long as the applicant is in compliance of all the things that are on this contract, I don't think he's going to damage the neighborhood in the ways that obviously I think we're looking at as a worst case scenario if these things happen. He can't do by what we have in the use permit here. He can't do some of the things that they're speaking of or concerned with, which makes me feel better that that's not going to happen. Obviously, you have the ability to come back if something does start to happen at that point and call code enforcement. There's ways around that. So that's why I would lean towards an approval for the project.
Thank you very much. Is any other discussions? Commissioner Birch, go ahead.
We may not be in the business of enforcing CC&Rs, but we are entitled to take into account the character of neighborhoods. By the testimony that's been given here, both by the applicant and by those in opposition to this project, Buckhorn Estates has been around for approximately a quarter of a century. And in that quarter of a century, Buckhorn Estates has largely remained unchanged. 5-acre lots, expensive homes on those lots, residential, no commercial development. The people that are in opposition, and there is massive opposition to this project, have opposed it because of those very reasons. It changes the character of this neighborhood that has been there for, again, a quarter of a century unchanged. Given that, given the impact potentially to the neighborhood, given the concerns that it may open the door to further commercial development, I am strongly opposed to it.
Any other comments? Commissioner Hilding?
Well, I do think the residents have a remedy if they're concerned about this as a precedent, and that would be to amend their CC&Rs. I also have to, thinking about the CC&Rs, look at it from the point of view of the applicant who may have relied on the CC&Rs in making decisions about purchasing and investing in this property. And for that reason, I am going to be in favor of this motion. I've heard numerous different things about the CC&Rs. One person testified that the CC&Rs are unclear about whether this use is permitted, and others said that they clearly do not allow commercial operations. And another person testified that there's no way the developer envisioned this type of operation. So either the CC&Rs prevent this, in which case the neighbors have a remedy, they can hire a lawyer and prevent it from going forward, or the CC&Rs do not. And if the CC&Rs do not, then I have to side with the applicant. He's entitled to rely on the CC&Rs as well, again, with regard to the purchase and development of his property. And if there's a concern about precedent, the CC&Rs can be amended to make sure this doesn't happen again in the future. But for those who've relied on the CC&Rs in their present state, I think there's a good case to be made that their expectations should not be disappointed.
Thank you. Commissioner Exton?
Yeah, to me, I'm in favor of this, but I also don't see it as a commercial development personally, simply because there's no retail component directly on site. With the added condition, there will be no real public events able to be held. It'll still be a 4-employee operation, and the fact that a lot of it will be naturally fenced in with the trees and everything. I don't see this as what I would consider something that would be commercial. Like Talea Winery off of Chinden and Garden City, that to me is more commercial. And then also, blanked on what else I was going to say, but said most of my points.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Wickstrom?
Thank you. I'm also not, well, I shouldn't say also, I'm not in favor of this development right now. I think it goes beyond the spirit of the term small-scale ag use, which is part of the county definition. It's not something in their CC&Rs. There's a big difference between processing something, whether it be cattle or grapes, making grapes into wine. That's an extra step beyond just raising something and then taking it off-site to do something else with it, or to just sell it there. If you're growing, if you're raising chickens to sell eggs, it's something very simple. There's not a lot of equipment, not a large building that's needed to do that. And again, I just think it goes beyond the spirit of what the intent was when the CC&Rs and with the zoning that was that exists for this particular development. I also agree that with the overwhelming opposition, in the past we've been influenced. We've had a lot of people come in to endorse a development. I think we should also consider that the other way too, when we have a lot of opposition to something and it's reasonable and it's kind of questionable as far as how far this development goes and not going along with what was intended for development, that we should take that into consideration as much when we get strong support for something. So I oppose this. I think that it is processing, it is a commercial use, and it is not consistent with that type of a neighborhood. Thank you.
So thank you. Any other comments from the commissioners after hearing other people's comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, I did remember my last thought. Regarding setting a precedent, I also don't see this, if this is approved, as setting a new precedent, even if the CCNRs are rewritten. Any other property owners that would want to do something like this would also have to, follow the similar process as this one, with going through Ada County in the formal process in that. So I don't think it would become a free-for-all. I think it would still have that structure.
Well, thank you. Any other comments?
Just one more.
One more comment.
It said that they're not going to have any tasting on the site or anything, but under Ada County Code, they can come back before this hearing, or to a hearing, and request that be a part of their process. It's part of the code that they would be allowed. It's not unreasonable for them to request that they are able to have events there and tastings. It's part of the code, and they can come back at some point and request that if they don't find us adequate retail space somewhere else, if something else comes along. And they've got a large building with a 1,200 square foot that's for personal use. Well, that personal use could easily be converted to commercial use for other activities. And they would be able to do 24 events with a maximum of 50 people per event per year. So that option is there, even though they're saying that they're not going to have any tasting or any events, but that's a potential down the road. And it's just a matter of coming in, and if they show that they're a good neighbor and they're handling everything, who's to say that this commission couldn't approve that as well?
Thank you. Any other comments?
One last comment. I appreciate all the responses of the commissioners, especially Commissioner Birch. I understand. I guess one thing I didn't state in my statement is just the small business and entrepreneurs out there that are trying to work during these times. And there's a lot of people that I personally work from a home office. I conduct my entire business from my home. That's where I do it. I don't have an office somewhere. And there's, a fine line that I want us all just to consider when we're looking at this is, where do you draw the line if his wife wants to do quilts in a spare bedroom in the house, and we want to, and she's, because I think by what we're looking at here, if we were not sitting here talking about it and that building was built, and say he said that was a man cave or something he was using for personal use, the noise and ordinances, all the stuff that we're already policing, no one would know what was going on inside. So where do we draw the line as commissioners to say that somebody can't have a small business in their home and try to make a living to help pay their bills? I know it looks like, it sounds like there's opposition, which is 100%. I agree with Commissioner Birch. That's what really is tugging at my heart the other way, is when you're in opposition, because I want neighbors to get together. I don't think that's a great situation when half the neighborhood, but by our numbers, and I counted the signatures, a lot of those are husband-wife signatures. That's one household out of those homes. I think it's a little under the halfway mark on that, but it's hard for me to, as a small business owner, to vote against someone trying to just make a living and produce income out of their home. And it's really easy for someone like us to say, no, you got to go spend $5,000 or $6,000 a month on a commercial space because we're not going to allow you to utilize the property you already own. So that's what my opposition is, and I 100% feel for all the people affected by this and don't want it. I do understand, but there's a business aspect to this too.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Before we vote, I'd like to say how much I appreciate all the dialogue and all the input from all the neighbors and the applicant. And I would like to remind everybody that there will be a process. It sounds like that the homeowners association can look at the design of the building. And so this is just, if this gets approved, this would just be the starting of some more engagement for the homeowners. So I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion that was presented?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. And all those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So let the record reflect that there were 5 ayes and 2 nays, so the motion passes. Thank you very much for your engagement. I'm going to call project number 202-101-387, CU MSP Larson Architects. And it's Mr. Danielson.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, project number 2021-01387, CU-MSP is a conditional use and master site plan application for a warehouse. The property is located at 6417 West Gowan Road in Section 30, Township 3 North, Range 2 East, and consists of approximately 22.21 acres. The warehouse will be a 27,500 square foot and is being built on bare ground that is currently used for construction staging for the concrete placing company. The applicant has proposed for 25% of the gross floor area to be dedicated to accessory office for the warehouse. The property is located in the Boise Air Terminal Airport Influence Areas Overlay District and is an Airport Influence Area C. The purpose of the Boise Air Terminal Influence Areas Overlay District is to promote the public health, safety, and welfare by limiting and/or placing additional restrictions on land use activities. A warehouse is a principally permitted use in the Airport Industrial District. However, subsection 8-3A-3A3 requires for any principal permitted use within Airport Influence Area C to apply for a conditional use except for agriculture and non-accessory off-premise signs. Therefore, the applicant has made an application for a conditional use along with a master site plan for the warehouse. Since the structure has a footprint that is greater than 10,000 square feet, it must be designed such that the building mass and bulk are distributed. There is variation in the horizontal offsets of the structure facade. Exterior elevations will be articulated via recessed office aluminum storefront entries on the east facade of the building. Additional ribbon storefront windows will be provided at the second floor level. The property is in Boise's impact area. The future land use map designates the property as industrial, which lists manufacturing, warehousing, storage, industrial parks, automotive repair, and similar uses as primary uses. As such, the warehouse is compatible with the Boise Comprehensive Plan as adopted by Ada County. The warehouse is also in compliance with the Ada County zoning ordinance as it complies with the findings of fact for conditional uses and master site plans, along with the specific use and overlay district standards. We did not receive any neighbor comments on this application. A number of agencies have provided comments on this application. The Ada County building official will require building permits. The Boise Fire Department will require a fire sprinkler system. The Boise Public Works Department mentioned that bulk quantities of materials utilized and stored on site and any hazardous processed wastewater or other waste materials should not be processed or stored in a manner that could result in discharge to sanitary sewer or stormwater management facilities. The Ada County Highway District has provided site-specific conditions of approval, and the Associate Ada County Engineer requires the submittal of a drainage plan. Key conditions of approval include the following. The Boise Fire Department, on behalf of the Whitney Fire District, must approve all fire flow requirements and/or building plans. The applicant and/or owner shall submit a landscaping and screening plan that complies with Article 8-4E of the Ada County Code. The applicant and/or owner shall submit a lighting plan that complies with Article 8-4H of the Ada County Code, and the county engineer must approve a surface drainage runoff plan, and the applicant will need to comply with ACHD's site-specific conditions of approval. Staff finds that the application complies with A County Code and the A County Comprehensive Plan and recommends approval to the commission, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. What questions do the commissioners have?
Just one quick one.
One question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is the occupant going to be the concrete placing company? Is this all for them?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna have the applicant maybe answer that question for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're good. We're ready for the applicant to come forward. If you'll give us your name and address, and
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Ada County Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Cornell Larson. My address is 210 Murray in Garden City. And I'm here tonight representing the applicant, which is Concrete Placing, or the owners of Concrete Placing. And we are the architects on the project. I've read through the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law, and we've looked at Exhibit A, which was the proposed conditions of approval, and we are in agreement with those conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, but this is the third building of the complex that was fronting on Gowan Road. Two of them are existing, and they're of very similar nature and quality to what's being proposed tonight.
thank you very much. What questions do the commissioners have?
Is this,
Commissioner Brown?
is this building for their personal use, or is this going to be a rented unit? Are they looking for tenants?
Madam Chairman, Commissioner Brown, they will probably lease this facility out to like-kind businesses that they currently are occupying the first building on that site, which is the farthest north building. They did lease out the second building to a building supply company. And so this is just a progression of developing along Gowan Road and finding tenants for them.
Thank you. Commissioner Roush, did you have a question?
Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Larson, regarding the neighborhood meeting that was held, were you present? And if so, what were some of the comments or concerns that were raised?
Madam Chairman, Commissioner Roush, I was present at the meeting and no one showed up. So, I tell you what the comments were.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions, so we appreciate you being here. You've got a chance after we ask the questions to the staff to provide a rebuttal if we have any.
Okay, and if there's someone online to testify, I don't know that either as well. But anyway,
Okay,
thank
what
you.
we're going to see. Thank you. Is there anybody in the courtroom or anybody online who would like to provide public testimony on this project? And I don't see anybody. And so what questions do we have for the staff? No questions? If you've got 5 minutes, if you want to talk for 5 more minutes, or you could call it good.
Madam Chairman, I was trying to make this short and just thank staff for their help on the project.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, we'll close the public hearing, and then I'll entertain a motion from the commissioners so we can begin deliberation. Commissioner Birch.
I move, based upon the findings of fact and conclusions of law contained in the staff report and the testimony at this public hearing, the commission approved project number 202-101-387-CU-MSP, subject to the conditions of approval attached as Exhibit A, the staff report, and the master site plan dated May 13th, 2021.
Second.
Commissioner Birch, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Wickstrom. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? So the motion passes 7 ayes. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is 202-100-324. And Ms. Sanders is presenting that item.
sorry. I grabbed the wrong document. Madam Chair, Commissioners, this is project number 2021-00324S. It's for England Sub. It's a preliminary plat for a 3-lot subdivision in a rural residential district, which requires a 10-acre minimum. The site is located on Locust Grove and King Road by Cuna. They are proposing the 3 lots. It's pretty straightforward. Each one will contain 10 acres. This is pictures of the site so you can kind of see how rural it is. And they will have conditions of approval. The applicant has to provide written approval from quite a few agencies, Ada County Highway District. They will have to provide the county engineer with specific information concerning his comments, and the owner he put in there that they'll test the wells for arsenic and submit that to the county. Staff is recommending approval, or for P&Z to recommend approval of the preliminary plat to the board. We did not receive any comments in opposition to this application, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. What questions do the commissioners have? I don't see any questions, so thank you very much. We'll talk to you in a few minutes. I'll go ahead and call the applicant to come forward, give us your name and address, and tell us what you can about this application. So thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Sarah Martz with SEM Consulting. I reside at 3117 West Smith Avenue, Boise 83703. I'm here this evening representing the owner of the property. We'd first like to just thank staff for all their time on this application and for the presentation this evening. I'm going to make this pretty short and sweet, I hope. We've read through all the conditions of approval, and we're in complete agreement with all of them as proposed. With that, I'll just stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. What questions do the commissioners have? Commissioner Wickstrom.
Just a quick one. Was there any access problems for maybe that middle lot that you're close to the intersection of King and Locust Grove? There's certain distances that you have to have between driveways and intersections like that. Was there any sort of problem with that that's going to pose a problem that you're aware of?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ridstrom, we did work with ACHD. One of their conditions is that we submit a site plan showing the driveway location off of Kings Road, which we have done, which is about 425 feet from Hobnobbin Lane, and they have approved that site plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
What questions do we have?
Madam Chair, I was just wondering, where did you come up with the name England for the subdivision?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Exton, that was actually the owner of the property. I'm not sure where he came up with it. We went through several. It's slim pickings out there for some subdivision names, so that was the one that happened to get approved.
Awesome, thank you. I was just curious.
Good question. Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. Ms. Martz, I just had one question. Were you present at the neighborhood meeting? If so, what were some of the comments or concerns that were raised, if any?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Roche, I was in attendance, actually held the neighborhood meeting, and there was no one in attendance.
Okay, thanks.
So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
Ms. Sanders and the staff. No questions? And Ms. Martz, as the applicant, you're welcome to provide any more comments if you wanted to. Okay. No more comments?
Please see if there's anybody online.
Yeah, I'll ask. Is there any, thank you for reminding me. Is anybody online or in the courtroom to testify on this? So thank you very much. So with that, I think we're ready to close the public hearing, and I will welcome a motion from the commissioners. You know, the public hearing is closed unless we want to open it back up.
I'll just discuss it with Dan.
Okay, sounds good. Any questions from the commissioners? Or any, ready for a motion? Commissioner Hilding?
Make a motion to approve project number 2021-00324 based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law contained herein and the testimony from the public hearing, subject to the conditions of approval attached as Exhibit A.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I will second.
Commissioner Exton seconded the motion. Is there any discussion from the commissioners? We're ready to vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please say aye. So the motion passes with a 7-0 vote. So we're ready for our last motion of this evening. Thank you very much for waiting patiently. It's 202-100152 CU James Williams, and Ms. Sanders is going to present it to us. Is second last? Oh, yeah, that's right, second to last. Shoot, I was hurrying through.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, this is project 2021-01152 CU. It is a conditional use for a riding arena in the rural residential district. It's just north of the subdivision that you just looked at. It is in this general area. This is the site. They do have an open riding arena. And this is the site plan, so they are providing parking along these areas in green. They will have horse stalls and the arena. The county code doesn't require parking for a riding arena. However, they will have events. We do want to make sure that cars are not backing out onto the road and that there's adequate space. The applicant has submitted this for their site plan. This is pictures again of the area. There are some conditions of approval. They will have to submit approval from Central District to help. The county engineer has to approve a drainage runoff plan, and the applicant shall provide a fire apparatus access turnaround. Staff is recommending approval of the conditional use for the riding arena, and we have not received any comments in opposition of this application.
So thank you very much. What questions do the commissioners have?
Just one quick.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On your, I know it's not to scale, on their drawing, it shows the parking. So they're not required, number one, to have that parking, to show the parking on the site. Is that what you said?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Wickstrom, there's not a on-site parking plan that would be required because it's just the conditional use. It doesn't come with a master site plan, but we do want to see the horse trailers, how they're going to park them so that they're not backing out onto a street and they're providing the circulation. So the number of vehicles isn't required with this conditional use, and we feel like they've addressed the parking.
Okay, yeah, I was just looking, I know it's not to scale, and they do show how if it would flow, there the intended flow of the traffic would be. It's just like there was a little bit of a bottleneck in that north end where they're first coming in. But I mean, I know, again, it's not to scale, and I just wondered if that was something they were concerned with, but they are trying at least to work out a parking situation there.
Some of their arrows on that site were kind of incorrect. It's like it goes one way and it doesn't go back out.
But there's two that go like this.
Yeah, so we do understand that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? I had a question for the riding arenas. Is there a general number of events that people can have per year, or can you have an event every weekend if you had the time and energy?
Sure, we don't typically restrict the number of events. It is a conditional use. You could, put a restriction. I don't know that they're going to have, that many events. A couple on the weekends and maybe once in a while in the evenings is what their letter said.
So thank you. Any other questions? So I think we'll go ahead and call the applicant to come forward and give us your name and address. I've got James Williams listed first.
Hi, thank you for hearing our plight here. We appreciate it very much. My name is Jim Williams. We live at 3386 Country Lane, which is just right adjacent to the area that we're proposing for the riding arena. I'd just like to say that many, many years ago, when we bought that property, we didn't realize that that was not considered a farm activity, and we've actually had barrel races there for 20 years. So that parking area is a parking area that we've been using. It's actually part of a pasture and a turnout for cattle when we have cows. So they park in that area. My wife is the director of the National Barrel Horse Association. So Beverly hosts about 18 to 20 barrel races a year, some which are out at other arenas. So we may have 12 to 16 a year at our arena. We don't have an interest really in doing anything else except for the National Barrel Horse Association events and for those members who have been the same ones for many, many years. So they can get in and out of there very well, have been doing it for a long time. And so other than that, I think that everything has been provided that shows that we know what we're doing. It's not a first-time event for us.
Well, thank you. There might be some questions from the commissioners. What questions, Commissioner Wickstrom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So which residence is yours? Are you immediately to the north end? You're close to which house you live?
Immediately to the north.
Right there,
Right.
okay, right. The closest one to the actual arena area.
Correct, right.
Okay, so, all right. But that's a separate parcel that you're on.
Correct. Yeah, our home sits on 2.5 acres, and then we have 21 acres, which was deed restricted back in 1993 when we first subdivided the property.
Okay. And so right now you're holding about, you said 12 to 16 events. How many events are you holding there at the site right now?
None. We haven't had any events for the last couple of years since we've been involved in subdividing, and then that was a restriction that we couldn't have any barrel races. So she's been paying dearly to have barrel races out at other arenas around in Canyon County and Ada County over the last year. So she has been holding all the events as her commitment as the director for the Barrel Horse Association, but we haven't had any at our arenas.
And you're in the comments here, so you're expecting between 30 to 60 participants in the events when you have one right now?
That's correct.
Okay,
Right.
all right, thank you very much.
What other questions do the commissioners have?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Roush?
Sir, just 2 questions. Did you have an opportunity to review the findings in the staff report, and if so, were there any issues or concerns?
No, I don't have any concerns from the findings. No.
Okay. And then were you present at the neighborhood meeting? And if so, were there any attendees? And if they were, any comments or concerns that they raised?
Yeah, there were attendees. We had most of our close neighbors around, and there weren't any comments about it because they've been accustomed to it. You know, they've all lived there, and we've had hundreds of events over the last 20 years there, barrel racing events. And then we also allow one other club to come in and have some events. And then there is a memorial for a young gal that passed away. They come in and do an event for her. So that's maybe 18 to 20 that we have there a year.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
What other questions do the commissioners have? Okay, I don't see any questions, so we're going to call you back at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next person listed is Beverly Williams. Yeah.
Hi, I'm his wife.
Bev Williams, 3386 Country Lane. We just thought I had to sign up to come along.
Okay.
I don't have anything to say unless you have any questions for me.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Not a question, just a comment. Thank you for what you do, that get these young people out there involved in that. It's a great activity for them.
Thank you. Yeah, I love trying to promote the Western way of life and keeping horses involved in this area. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Sanders? Or is there, I'm sorry, I should ask, is there anybody else in the room or online who has comments or wants to make a statement for this project? So any questions for Ms. Sanders? Any questions? I had a question about, is there any boarding activities or is it just the arena event activities?
Madam Chair, I believe they can board several horses. I think they have 4 stalls, if I remember correctly.
And maybe the applicant can talk to us about that in the wrap-up. So, any other questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and ask the applicant to come forward. If you could please answer the question or comment about the number of boarding stalls that you might have.
Yeah. We currently board off and on 1, and we own 5 of our own. But we would like to have that option as, taxes increase and maintenance increases. Really, all the activities and the amount of money that we make off of that facility just barely covers the maintenance and the taxes on the property. And she has fun doing it. She has a lot of loyal people that follow her for the National Barrel Horse Association. So we just wanted to have the option of boarding a few more horses if we need more revenue.
We don't have facilities. We would build more stalls if we were going to board more horses.
Thank you. I guess we'll count that as the applicant's comments. So thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments? So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'll look for a motion from the commissioners, one way or the other.
I'll motion, based upon the findings of fact and conclusion of law contained here in the testimony from the public hearing, the commission approves project 202101152 CU, subject to the conditions of approval attached in Exhibit A and the revised site plan dated April 27th, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Hilding. Any discussion?
I'd just like
Go
to
ahead.
second the comment. Thank you for what you do on My Daughter Road. And my niece is riding now, and I know a lot of people that especially had some kids that needed some guidance, and barrel racing's been a good thing for them. So thank you.
I just got it, Madam Chair. I got to say, since it's not your first rodeo, we can be confident that you're going to do a good job with this, and appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, any opposed? So the motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. So this is really our last one. Mr. Lindstrom, our unfinished business at 202-000, I'm sorry, I'll start over. 202-101-024-Z08, Ada County. Mr. Lindstrom.
Thank you. I did have a tiny presentation for you, but I apparently did not load up. That's okay though, because I'll read you this brief memo here and we'll go for it. So application 2021-024-ZOA was a zoning ordinance text amendment application to allow for virtual public hearings and neighborhood meetings. This was tabled during your last June 10th P&Z hearing to allow staff to provide the commission their preferred language pertaining to Ada County Code Section 8-7A 3C. So both the language originally proposed by staff and that of the commission I can read for you. So the original was the purpose of the neighborhood meeting shall be to review the proposed project, and such meetings may be held in person or virtually remotely at the discretion of the applicant. What you were preferring was that the language be changed to say that such meetings shall be held in person with the option to hold an additional virtual meeting. So staff is recommending that the original amendment language proposed by staff and that preferred by the commission be forwarded on to the board. This will allow the board's preference to be adopted in the final zoning ordinance. All other proposed changes with this text amendment shall remain as previously presented to the commission in your last hearing. Revised findings of fact and conclusions of law have also been provided to you. Once again, you're recommending to the board on this application, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Awesome. I think there might be some questions.
Absolutely.
So let's go ahead. Do you want to go first, Commissioner Hilding?
Yes, I feel pretty strongly about this, so I will talk for a few minutes. First of all, I don't think you've accurately captured what we were talking about. We were talking about not an option of an additional virtual meeting, but supplementing the in-person meeting with the ability to, for people to attend virtually. That's very different, and I want this to be represented correctly. The purpose of this memo is to present it to the Ada County Board of Commissioners, right?
This memo was presented to you, so this is to the Planning and Zoning Commission from staff.
Well, what's the purpose of this memo?
So the memo is just explaining what was done in the last meeting and then explaining how.
Is it going to be submitted to someone else?
This is submitted to you, Ada County Planning and Zoning Commission from staff.
Okay. So in any event, that would more accurately represent what was discussed. You may remember at the beginning, I was kind of confused about what this was about. And I just read over the minutes a while ago. And you said, I don't believe this virtual option is meant to get rid of the in-person option, but provides an additional way for people to attend. And you also said, I believe it is up to the applicant to make sure that everyone is able to attend. So if folks do have difficulty attending virtually, the applicant needs to allow them to be able to attend in person. And then everybody who spoke here was in complete agreement with that. That it's very important to have the in-person meeting. Your memo references how it appeared that there was better accessibility and participation during, I guess, during the pandemic by virtue of the virtual option. I am interested in seeing the data on that. I want to know how many more you got, and I want to know, you said it was easier for people to participate. I'm wondering if there was an actual survey about people's preferences. As you know, in Ada County right now, there's a lot of people who feel their voices are not being heard. The idea of leaving it up to some real estate developer to decide whether they were going to have an actual in-person meeting or not, I would think would be very problematic for a lot of people. So if you're saying that you've done some kind of survey and everybody said, no, that's fine, we don't need to be face-to-face with these developers on these big projects, it's fine to do this virtually, then I'd love to see that data. But I kind of suspect that if you surveyed your constituency, there'd be very few people who would want to do away with, to let developers have the option of doing away with in-person meetings. In fact, virtual meetings have been around for a few years, but in democracies, virtual meetings have been around for 2,500 years. Actual meetings have been around for about 2,500 years. Started with the Greeks, and there's a lot of value in being able to get together and try to work things out face to face. So I feel very strongly that you should consider going back to the original way you explained this and what we all supported, which was that there would be a required in-person meeting and then the option of a supplemental virtual meeting if the applicant so desired. And, if you feel that that there's some communities of disabled people that would thereby be denied participation, you might even go farther and say actual meetings are required, virtual meetings are optional. However, if somebody who's opposed to a project specifically requests, then the virtual meeting is required. And a final comment, all of my experience with virtual meetings is that there are glitches and problems with them. And we saw them tonight. We see them in every, I see them almost all the time when it's done via computer. And your proposed amendment does not explain what is satisfactory compliance with a virtual meeting requirement. What if we're not able to hear so-and-so? What if somebody else gets cut off and loses the ability to make a comment halfway through the meeting? It doesn't seem to me like a developer who's trying to get a project through against a lot of opposition has any incentive to go out of his or her way to make sure the virtual meeting runs smoothly. In fact, I would think the incentive would be just the opposite direction. So I can't say strongly enough how I feel about the language that we proposed, reflecting it accurately in your memo, and making sure that that becomes the way the code is amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hilding. Commissioner Birch is.
Oh, Madam Chair, I just wanted to provide some clarification.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make sure, Mr. Hilding, that, do you have the memo in front of you? I'm sorry.
I do, yes.
Okay, so there's the original proposal, which was giving folks the option, the developer, the discretion to decide. And so just under that, I have there the requirement, actually the change to require that the virtual hearing be held in person, with the option to hold an additional virtual meeting. Is that not what
So the problem is the word additional. It suggests there's going to be a second meeting sometime in the future.
Right, so
what we were talking about is at the time of the in-person meeting, which is required, that the developer has the option at that time of allowing people to participate virtually. And that will I am kind of curious about the impetus for this, because the average number of COVID cases in Idaho in the last 14 days is 134, and there's less than one death in the statewide now. And I'm not saying it's over, but somehow we got through the pandemic without this change, and now we're making it at a time when I would think people are less worried about getting together. So I'm curious, who's behind this? What is this, some developer who wants to stop seeing people show up at meetings with pitchforks, or is this somebody on staff?
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hilding, the Board of County Commissioners, they were kind of the ones that spearheaded this effort to say that we've been doing this virtual thing for a while. We like to see this keep going. We feel that there's been more attendance and so forth. So the board worked with legal staff to craft what was originally presented. And so as myself, Development Services staff, I'm presenting what legal had provided us. So I personally did not write this, but legal staff did. But go ahead.
Sorry, is this working? I can't tell if it's on or not. Madam Chair, Commissioner Hilding, I will say that, wow, that's too close, sorry. Got some hot mics here today, I apologize. There's a couple things going on here. There was a the governor's executive order that allowed all meetings to be held virtually that was in effect up until basically the end of June, which essentially stayed all code requirements that these meetings be held in person. So in light of that lapsing and the COVID pandemic kind of up in the air at the time, and when this original application was started, I think we were in probably March or April. So at that time, much different COVID situation than what you've just described. Where we are today, you're right, thankfully, is a much brighter picture for COVID. But I think the concern is this humanity's last pandemic? We are moving to virtual everything. Having a code that is flexible and adaptable to allow that is what we're seeking to do. And no way are we trying to limit someone's ability to participate. We're hoping this actually increases participation. As to your question about is there a survey of whether or not participation was better or less, no. Anecdotally, we've personally, my experience at the city and what we've had at the county, we've had great success with a lot of our pre-application meetings and other meetings like that with the virtual format. So, you know, I think it's important to recognize, I think clearly the commission is uncomfortable with this, and I think that's okay. You know, you are a recommending body. Every concern you have will be put into a follow-up memo. So that's another answer to your question, Commissioner Hilding. There will be another memo written after this meeting to our board explaining kind of the progression of this, the fact it was tabled, the fact that the commission had concerns and those were stated, and we will state all those in the memo and ultimately allow the board to make the decision as to if they want this or not. But Connor's recollection of how this got started was, yes, essentially leadership said, okay, we're in this virtual format. You know, we don't know how long this is going to happen. It seems to be kind of working. There's concern that our code isn't flexible enough to allow this thing to happen in the event an executive order is ended, which if you've been paying close attention to legislation, those have been stopped and started multiple times, both by our current governor and lieutenant governor. So, you know, I think it was an attempt to kind of bridge that gap. But, you know, in no means are we trying to make this a less accessible experience for the neighborhood. So if there's more specific language that you would like in your preferred option, I think this would be a great time to maybe look at what Connor's provided and see if, you know, how could we state this more clearly to what we originally said we wanted, and we will present both to the board. So
Just to be clear, so whatever we end up coming up with, you're still going with the original language. That's what the staff has already decided.
yeah, Chair, Commissioner Hilding, you know, in this unique situation, Development Services is the applicant. So yes, we kind of are representing the application from our perspective as to, one, what our legal team has advised us as to what could be a good fit and what our personal experience has been.
Okay.
So ultimately, that is why we would bring both forth. We don't typically do that, but this is a situation where clearly we're having some discussion about it. And I think it's a good discussion that our board should be aware of and ultimately make the decision for how we do things moving forward. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown?
Directed to either or, I guess. Is there, so I think I get that the revised version did hit pretty close. But I also agree that kind of is there a way to just change the verbiage to say simultaneously? Because it does read in a way additional, like makes it sound like another meeting. It separates the two. Is there a way that we can pass this with the, motion to pass this with, adding the verbiage to say simultaneous virtual meeting so that we understand that it's, because I do agree with that part of it, and we can, in the discussion part, I'll give my opinion on that, but to say simultaneously instead of.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Brown, you can essentially recommend it to say whatever you like. So you're recommending to the board, you can add or subtract anything that you would like. I mean, you're making a motion, so that is. Yeah.
Okay, we've got another question. Commissioner Exton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say I was not in attendance last meeting, but I did read the minutes. And I personally do really like the fact that Ada County Development Services is kind of making that movement to formalize virtual meetings. I think it's a really good format, especially for the fact that we're in 2021, moving forward, virtual is going to be a big thing. In regards to language, one thing I would like to see though is, such meetings shall be held in person with a mandatory option to allow virtual attendance during that meeting to increase accessibility, because I think that's kind of what the spirit of this amendment is increasing accessibility to people who may be, on a trip, aren't able to physically make it to the virtual meeting or the in-person meeting address during that time slot for whatever reason, whether it be a commute or something. So I personally like the idea of having it be a mandatory, accessibility requirement kind of aspect rather than, either a separate additional or, maybe they have to do, or maybe they can do virtual if they want. I would just like to see that it's more formalized in the sense that, you have to have that option available to everyone.
So the further question is the purpose of this, like, because are we talking this is going right down to even neighborhood, it says neighborhood meetings. So this could be a small neighborhood meeting, and if we mandate that they have the technology to have a virtual meeting, I mean, if we said mandatory, I mean, we're giving them the option, obviously, but because in person would make sense if you're talking about a small neighborhood meeting, right? Like, they may not even be in a location that they could do a virtual meeting. Is it this verbiage would go all the way down to even the smallest little neighborhood meetings, right?
Yeah, so Madam Chair, Commissioner Brown, this specifically is about neighborhood meetings. So this is the meeting that is held before they submit the application to
At the neighborhood level.
Exactly, yep.
Okay, so they may not even have the ability to do it.
Okay, what other questions do we have or comments? Commissioner Birch?
My preference would be to do has been suggested of having an absolutely required in-person meeting with the option of individuals to be able to attend virtually if they wish to. So the applicant would have to have the personal meeting. The applicant would have to arrange for people to be able to connect virtually. That is what would maximize the attendance. For all of the reasons that Commissioner Hilding has expressed, I feel very strongly about this. There's an energy, an electricity, passion, emotion that goes with in-person meetings. Over the past year and a half, I've attended probably 100 to 200 virtual meetings. I've attended many meetings in person throughout my career. There is a huge difference between a virtual meeting and an in-person meeting. One of my favorite performers had a virtual concert, and I was one of probably about 300 people that attended. I also have attended that individual singer's concert in person. They were not the same. The in-person concert was much more electrifying. What's going to happen at most of the meetings is no one will show up, or a few people will show up just out of curiosity. This was a good example tonight of what would likely happen at the Buckhorn Estates project. You would have had a lot of people show up. When you're at a personal meeting, there's the eye rolls that you see, the pregnant pauses, the sideward glances, the whispers of affirmation or condemnation based on what a speaker is saying. You don't get that with a virtual meeting. There's the opportunity to go with your neighbor to those meetings. And then when you walk out of the meeting to have discussions with your neighbor, you don't have that with virtual meetings. Having virtual meetings will stifle the comments that would normally be given at those meetings. You will not have the democratic process that we expect if you have just virtual meetings. It will be, as Commissioner Hilding says, any developer, if they were asking me as an attorney, should I have a virtual meeting or an in-person meeting? I would say, hey, you think it's going to be controversial? Absolutely, virtual meeting. Because we don't want the neighbors to get together and have private discussions. And so that's where I'm coming from. An absolute firm requirement of an in-person meeting with a requirement that virtual option be extended to anyone that does not want to attend in person.
Madam Chair, may I just,
ahead.
I'd love to chime in on that comment. I think if we're going to put something in that makes it optional in the code, we should probably just leave it out altogether. Because, one, that language might confuse someone who's trying to figure out what the neighborhood meeting needs to entail. So I think making it optional isn't something we typically codify. It's a yes or no is what we want to codify. So I think if the board wants to go optional, we should probably eliminate the virtual neighborhood meeting thing altogether to be very clear that the in-person thing is your preference and your priority. I think that would be more clear. I think Commissioner Exton brought up the possibility of a simultaneous virtual option, which you could require, but I think Commissioner Brown raised the issue that we may have some applicants that aren't technologically savvy, just like we're concerned neighbors might not be technologically savvy to be able to pull off the meeting in that regard. If we now ask, not to pick on anybody here tonight, but perhaps our commercial writing arena that doesn't know how to hold a virtual meeting, and now we're saying you've got to simultaneously do this virtually. How are we, and how are we documenting that? So I think there are some challenges on that side too. So I guess I would encourage the commission to If you feel like in-person's the only way we got to do this, we can rely on future executive orders, hopefully, that say, hey, we're suspending all in-person meeting requirements and it's going to be virtual. I think Development Services' motivation for this is if we find ourselves with COVID-20, which, gosh, that's just such a terrible thought. I don't want to say it out loud. And some weird thing happens where in-person's required, but nobody wants to go to the meeting. What have we done there? The virtual thing has become kind of a challenge. So I fully understand. I think Commissioner Birchie makes some great points about the energy of a crowd and people talking to each other and exchanging ideas. I do think that there's some value there. I guess I would just encourage you to state whatever your preference is, and if in-person is it, we should move forward with that. Do keep in mind there's another part of this ordinance that allows for public hearings to be held virtually. And I think, that is the more formalized meeting where the county is sending out notification for when the meeting's occurring. We're going through this whole process of a sign-in sheet. So, we are controlling that meeting process more than the applicant. But there is that is a part of this code too. Connor's original memo explained that we are making public hearings a virtual option moving forward as well to continue doing what we're doing here. So just be aware of that.
So, thank you. Commissioner Hilding wants to talk. Commissioner Wickstrom, have you had a chance to say anything? You're going to yield to Commissioner Hilding.
I think if we take out the option of a virtual hearing, it makes us sound kind of anti-technology, and we're not. And in fact, the memo kind of, I felt was written in a way that made our opposition sound that way, and that's not at all what we're saying. We're not against virtual meetings. It's already been said many times. We're fully in favor of virtual meetings, but we're also in favor of the requirement of an in-person meeting. So the idea of a mandatory option of a virtual meeting, that doesn't even sound quite right in my head. I think our preferred language would be such meetings shall be held in person with the option to simultaneously hold an additional virtual meeting. To simultaneously hold a virtual meeting, get rid of the word additional. But I don't feel like we should have to say this, but just in case there's any confusion, we totally understand and support the concept of virtual meetings, particularly for people who are disabled or have other challenges that prevent them from showing up in person.
Thank you. One more.
Just to clarify your statement, because I agree with exactly how Mr. Heldon said it. You're okay with that because you're saying either optional or not. So I don't agree with mandating a mandatory online, but I think if we could word it in a way that was optional, simultaneous. I just want simultaneous in there, not additional. But I think we should have it. I mean, I travel 11 states. I'm on an airplane tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I fly all over. Sometimes I can't get to all the meetings, and virtual. COVID or not, virtual helps me be able to attend some meetings and get my opinion in on meetings I need to be in. So I think virtual is the way to go to increase attendance, but I don't want to mandate it because, like I said, I can't imagine, like you said, this writing arena having to sit down and figure out how to put together that could be used against the people too, in a way, the same way. But I am 100% for in-person meetings. I mean, I think we all agree with that. I mean, that's the way it should be.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Brown, again, I think in the code, we don't normally put things like you can also optionally do this because if no one ever takes you up on it, why did we put it in there?
Right.
That seems more of like a neighborhood meeting best practice pamphlet that we should provide people like, hey, you're required to do this neighborhood meeting. Have you considered a simulcast virtual meeting to improve accessibility? I think if we want to leave the language in for the purposes of what Commissioner Hilding is saying is that, we don't want to come across as anti-technology. And if we put it in there, perhaps it inspires more people to incorporate that into their neighborhood meetings. I think there's value in doing that. So I guess at this point, if the commission wants to agree on the final language, that would be great for us. And we'll bring the final language that you come up with tonight as well as our original, and we'll probably have this discussion again with our board to figure out ultimately where they want to land on this. Because again, we were kind of directed by leadership to go this approach. I'm not saying you have to worry about running afoul with that. It's just that the idea originated with, again, kind of the legal team and leadership saying, we're doing this, we got to formalize this, so let's figure that out.
I just want to make one more comment. First of all, I agree and understand your point about why putting the word option in there has some legal issues. But I do want to also make sure you understand my point, which is that I'm very strongly opposed to your original language. And I'm not sure, maybe you do, maybe the staff and maybe Ada kind of understands the implications, the political implications of that language. But that proposal, if that is approved, I think is going to have enormous ramifications once people find out that either the staff or other instrumentalities or organs of the county are eliminating the requirement for in-person meetings at a time when the city of Boise is the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and Ada County is exploding. And just as that's happening, you're saying to developers, you know what? You can just do all this virtually. And boy, that ought to grease the wheels. That ought to streamline the process. I don't know if politically, if that's what you, the staff, want to be supporting, or if that's what the county commissioners want to be supporting. So I was hoping to persuade you to abandon the original language. And if that's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. But that was really why I spoke out.
Well, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hilding, again, it is a recommendation, so everything is brought forward. We don't abandon parts of the original memos or anything like that. So all of that, the entire record is before the board. You know, what we proposed in the original application, what our initial memo said to you, what this memo tonight has said to you. So it's already part of the record. We're not going to go redact that. I mean, that's just not the practice of public hearings. So the board will have a chance. And what we can do is very, strongly state the Planning and Zoning Commission is in strong opposition to the original way that staff has written this, and this is their preferred, and we serve it up to them to figure out what they want to do.
So we've heard from quite a few people. Is there anybody that hasn't talked that would like an opportunity to talk? Commissioner Roush.
Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Lindstrom, so if we were to request, it sounds like what would be then a hybrid meeting of, it's same one time and place with an option to participate virtually. Would it language like upon request of attendees to provide a remote access to the meeting?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Roush, once again, I mean, you can say whatever you like. I think that what Commissioner Hilding said kind of involves everything that everybody said great, and it would say the proposed project in such meetings shall be held in person with the option to simultaneously hold a virtual meeting. That is what Commissioner Hilding said. That kind of lays it out. So.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, to that point, Commissioner Roush, I think it comes down to an enforcement piece for us. How do we verify if a neighborhood attendee made that request to the developer and they didn't comply, and then what does that do to the state of the application? It becomes a kind of a pretty messy, even pre-application move to try to say, hey, if someone reaches out in advance, you've got to do it this way, and we're going to double check. I just think it becomes a difficult enforcement piece for development services to follow up with. But I do appreciate the idea of trying to get to something that's a little bit more of less than of an option in the code.
Commissioner Birch has a comment.
Yeah, correct me if I'm mistaken, Commissioner Hilding, but I don't think that's what you were saying. I think that another way of wording it would be that there would be mandatory in-person meeting, but the applicant may, at the applicant's discretion, arrange for virtual access.
There you go. If that's the language you prefer, then I would encourage you to put that in the final motion that's made. I think Connors was close to that, but if that's what we want to do more specifically,
That was good language.
whatever the language you guys want to go with specifically is
Can you
great.
repeat it, Commissioner Birch?
No, I was just
Yeah, so,
writing that down.
And commissioners, so whatever is spoken into the record, we have the ability to listen back, and we will have the exact wording in your recommendation. So.
Madam Chair.
I
just-
do have a,
okay,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, no, you're fine. Commissioner Wickstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick, so we're sort of in I hate to call it a contest right now, but you have your approach that you want to come up with. You have your original statement. And so I think it's really important that we get ours the way we want it to, and to say what we want to say. One of the big sticking points that we're stuck on is at the discretion of the applicant, that should not be left to that decision should not be left to the applicant to make. And as Commissioner Hilding has said, it's going to open up a can of worms, and I think that would be the case. So are we really are now, just you've got your idea, we've got ours, we're going to come up with our best, and you're going to come up with your best, and we're going to present them to the commissioners. That seems to be the path that we're on.
Well, Madam Chair, Commissioner Wickstrom, maybe as a way to get to this, rather than at the discretion of the applicant, you could put it at the discretion of the planning director or development services director to determine if a virtual meeting's appropriate for, say, a large-scale project that could have far-reaching impacts on the community, and people from, the CUNA area aren't going to get to the, East Boise area or something like that. I mean, you could craft language that way that says, rather than optional, like, at the discretion of the planning director, a virtual meeting may also be required, or something to that effect. If that's what I'm trying to help you craft something that has more teeth, I guess, regarding, it sounds like in-person is always happening, but if we want to continue to make virtual an option, not really an option, if we want to leave virtual on the table, let's not leave it at the option of the developer, but let's make it a development services call as to, you also need to do a virtual with this one. This one seems like it's appropriate for a virtual meeting. I don't know.
Madam Chair, one last.
Commissioner Hilding.
I'm starting to feel like, why are we doing this, making this incredibly important decision without public input? Why? I mean, we ought to have this room full of people before we take away their right to have in-person meetings. Maybe you're right. Maybe none of them, everybody would be just fine with that. And, if they all were 20-somethings, that might be perfectly fine with them. So I guess I'm speaking on behalf of what I think is the public interest. And I certainly understand your point of view. And I understand the idea of efficiency and accessibility increases in some senses. All that makes sense to me. But this is a very important decision. It is, I'm not going to say any more. I think politically this could have huge ramifications, particularly if it gets presented kind of not the right way. So would it be fair to go back one more time and discuss with your legal counsel and political folks whether this is a brilliant move to make this amendment without public input?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hilding, I mean, this is a public hearing item. It's been noticed, like we notice other public hearing items. We've been, again, operating under an executive order that just allowed this to occur. In a survey of our partner jurisdictions within Ada County, they are all still allowing virtual hearings, despite the fact that apparently or virtual meetings, neighborhood meetings, despite the fact that executive order isn't there. Like, everyone's still practicing all of this. Ada County is the jurisdiction that's trying to say, hey, the executive order is over. Like, we have to formalize this virtually or not, because we've got some applicants that are kind of stuck in limbo. Like, they're still holding a virtual meeting, but now we're actually, just recently, we've said no more virtual meetings. It's all in person because we no longer have that option through the executive order. So, I mean, I guess I would, if we're going to try to engage the public more beyond how we've already done, I'm not sure what you would want that to look like. Is it I mean, we've been advertising, doing things virtually for, 18 months now. I don't know, what would that look like? What would the ask of the community look like if we were going to pause and do that? Is probably, I'm the applicant in the situation. What would you want the applicant to do?
I had an opinion piece for the Statesman talking about how the right to in-person meetings is about to disappear. That might cause people to show up.
I mean, certainly, I guess if someone wanted to write a piece that way, that could certainly happen. I mean, again, I think it's, I don't think deferral is necessarily what we need to do here. I think that staff, with sharing of the minutes and the memo that we're going to prepare, our board will be made very aware that this entire commission has an issue with this virtual neighborhood meeting piece, and that that's something they're going to have to figure out. I'm concerned that if we defer again, we're getting that much farther away from giving people an answer as to how to effectively or properly hold a neighborhood meeting. So,
We've got a couple questions here. Commissioner Exton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I personally really like the phrasing you gave, Leon, where it's up to the development services if this should be like a mandatory thing or whatever, kind of on a case-by-case basis. I really like that option because it still had the ability to do virtual, but it's still it seemed like it was in between of what a lot of the people on this commission want of it has to be in person, but also still having that flexibility. So I think that's something a lot of people from the public have really enjoyed, is the ability to have that flexibility with virtual. Like you said, Commissioner Brown, you travel a lot, you're able to, be involved more with the virtual. And the other thing I think about is if we don't codify this, and let's just say there is a COVID-20, like you said, and there is no executive order, and there's a lockdown, no one can have an in-person meeting, then to me, I would understand that as kind of pauses all development, because there's no other way to do it. And if there is no executive order, another lockdown, that would also give development services the ability to say, hey, you all need to do this now since you can't gather in person. So I personally like the language you put forward. I'd like to see that as an option, since it, to me, balanced what the rest of the commission wants, and also, what I see important as being able to have that virtual meeting.
So do you want to make a comment on that?
No.
You're good. Commissioner Birch?
Yeah, one thing that clearly offended me by the way that this was written was it did, as Commissioner Hilding say, make it sound like the commission was anti-technology. That was not the main focus of why we objected to it. What I would like to see in the next memo that comes out, at least from my perspective, is that as a commissioner, I believe that anything other than an in-person meeting suppresses debate, inhibits public involvement, and is anti-democratic. That's what I would like to see in the memo. If the commission is looking at something that is produced by staff, I want it to accurately reflect the views, at least from my perspective, of how I see this. And that's exactly how I see it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Birch, certainly we can verbatim provide that quote. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown?
We're kind of rolled into this.
Sorry.
I'm trying to get a feel for what everybody else is thinking. So the way I hear it, I don't think anybody at all is in the room or anywhere else is in agreement, doesn't want in person, right? We're not trying, and by the fact that it's back here, it's taken the original off the plate, right? Which was the original verbiage that we did that sounded like it was optional.
You can, yeah.
Okay, so that's gone, so we
You can
don't.
recommend whatever you like.
Right,
And
and
everything
I
will
really
be.
like the way Commissioner Birch put it. I thought that, and Hilding, either way, but Commissioner Birch's was pretty clean cut. I think we all agreed with that. Are we able to just motion to, you know what I mean? Like, can we go to that to?
Can I
Let me
propose a motion?
You know what? I have a question that hasn't been answered. So, what do you do when somebody has an ADA issue and says, "Gosh, I can't get to there because of the terrain. I can't get my wheelchair over the terrain to get to the homeowners to the meeting." What does your team do when that happens?
Yeah, Madam Chair, there is no ADA accessibility requirement attached to neighborhood meetings. Or if you're going to hold one, it has to be an ADA accessible place. I mean, I would say it's inferred that you shouldn't be holding meetings that aren't accessible, but it's certainly not stated in our code. And I mean, I'm sure that happens all the time, frankly. I mean, county properties are unique. They're on unimproved roadways. They're large fields that are probably difficult to get to. They're up in the hills. But yeah, there is no statement in our code about holding a meeting in an ADA accessible place.
So right now, I'm going to follow up question. So right now, if somebody calls you and says, "Hey, I couldn't get to the neighborhood meeting because of accessibility issues for whatever reason, what does your team tell that person?
Yeah, Madam Chair, in the event that happens, we inform them of the process that's happening next. And we encourage them to provide that information to the board as a part of their testimony that, the meeting was held in a place that was not easily accessible for an individual, like that. It's part of their testimony, but we don't deny submittal of the application based on that sort of thing.
Okay, I just didn't know if there was something else in the code that
Yeah.
would deal with that. I'm with everybody in that we want to have on-site meetings in order to preserve the democratic process of the neighbors being able to provide input on properties. I'm open to there being simultaneous virtual access to those meetings. And I guess I'm not super worried if that access is at the applicant's, if the applicant decides or the team decides. I mean, I think people will use their good judgment for that. And so I would hate to create another list for somebody. Because I think if the applicant comes here and says, well, we had our meeting and there's 75 people that said, gosh, we wanted to go to the meeting, but it was too hard to get to, we'll be able to give that feedback to the applicant.
That kind of stands out as a red flag, in a sense.
Yeah, so I like the idea of the wording that says that they need to continue to have the meetings in person with the option, the way that Commissioner Birch worded it, I thought was fine. So that's where I'm leaning.
So Madam Chair, what I would suggest is that we simply vote on the motion I made last time, which was to reject and deny the original language. And we've now created a record of what our thoughts are with regard to alternatives. I don't know that sitting here we can legislate that and get it exactly right, but this, my understanding, is going to be presented to the Board of Commissioners, and that's fine. So my motion is to deny.
Madam Chair,
I'm sorry.
are you making a motion?
Yeah.
So are we going to ask for public testimony?
Is there any more
Anyone
public
online?
testimony? We're going to stop. Is there any more public testimony? Anybody that wants to make a comment here?
I think it's a good thing for the record to reflect that there is no public here. Right?
And there's no public here right now. Does the applicant, which is the county, have any other comments they'd like to make before we make a motion?
I guess this is rebuttal. This is kind of.
Yeah, this is a rebuttal, yeah. You got 5 minutes.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, I think this is a great debate, and I think this is why we do what we do as planning staff. And, we want to get this right, and we understand that there's some problems with this, and we're thankful to have a Board of Commissioners to go have a follow-up discussion with next and give them the input that you're providing. I'm not going to ask you not to deny it. I guess as the applicant, I technically could do that, but there are other aspects of that I think you wanted to keep. So maybe if I were going to recommend a motion, it would be to approve and strike that particular section, but that's at your discretion, whatever you want to do. Ultimately, this is a recommendation, and they can take or keep or remove anything they want at the next level. But as you recall, and Connor might be able to refresh your memory as to the other aspects of the amendment that I think you were okay with, like virtual public hearings. And Connor, do you quick recap of the other aspects of the amendment?
Yeah, so you have the other aspect is to allow for this to keep happening, essentially, to provide an option for this public hearing to be held virtually as well as in person. So that's the other main portion of this application that legal had crafted to make sure that it states that specifically. Because right now it says that public hearings have to be held in this room alone. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to make one narrow point, and that is I want the Board of County Commissioners to hear that this body rejected your original language with unanimously and with extreme prejudice.
Okay.
I want them to get that message from us. Now, I don't know if everybody agrees with that in this body, but if they do, I want to make that motion, vote on it, and then address anything else that people think need to be addressed. Is that okay, Madam Chair, to have a vote on the original language?
Yeah, and I think so the findings in fact has got that language, and so we could do one of two things. We could just reject the whole thing, or we could say that we want to amend the language to read procedures to conduct neighborhood meetings. We've got to find the spot that says that in the findings of fact. What number is
Madam
it?
Chair, I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
so the findings of facts and conclusions of law, there's like 3 pages here. That specifically does not have the language in it that we're talking about tonight. This findings of fact talks about the code sections that'll be changed and how there is a recommendation of approval on the board currently. So if you are to go with the denial and recommend denial of this application, we would need to change our findings of fact to reflect what it is that you're recommending. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, so if you could point tell me what number in the findings of fact matches up with the memo. So where's that statement that's in the memo in the findings of fact?
So, Madam Chair, the findings of fact document talks about, if you go through on page 2, where it talks about the zoning ordinance amendment, there's specific criteria for zoning ordinance amendments. So the first one is that the zoning ordinance amendment is in accordance with the applicable comp plan. So that's where we said the commission finds the proposed zoning ordinance text amendment complies. You go through each by each. There's 5 of them total. So that's specific to the zoning ordinance text amendment. The actual language is part of the record, and it's an exhibit. And that language was crafted by legal, and that actually shows where the code would be struck out and new codes or new language would be added. So that's an exhibit. I don't have, let's see if I can find that here.
Is that in the report?
I believe it is exhibit 3.
On page 5?
Nope, exhibit 5. Exhibit 5.
And report, just as if you're looking for that. So I'll just jump in with Connor's here. You can deny the whole thing. You can approve a part. You can approve it all. Those are your options. And so if you recommend approval, it would be, and you wanted to remove things, would be recommending approval with the request to remove the amendment to the neighborhood meeting process would be the cleanest way. And we could use extreme prejudice as well if we wanted to. But we're going to include all of that in the minutes and in our memo. I mean, again, there's no way this memo doesn't contain the concern that you have. We will definitely share that with our board. That's important to us as a service to this group in making recommendations to the next level.
Well, that's why I asked the question, for whom that original memo, the memo we're looking at right now was written, because that does not, I don't feel, fully and accurately represent this discussion. That's why I was playing around with the words extreme prejudice. I wanted that level of concern to be communicated.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hilling, that memo is only to you, and we will be writing a whole new memo capturing the conversation and the events of tonight.
Oh, so it's number C. I finally found it. I'm sorry. I'm so slow. Go ahead, Commissioner Birch.
To Commissioner Hilding's point, we don't need to have just a single motion. We could have multiple motions. And so if Commissioner Hilding wishes this commission to unanimously agree that we are vociferously opposed to the elimination of in-person meetings, as that no applicant can say, I will not have an in-person meeting, and that we feel extremely strongly about it, he could certainly make that motion And then it would be of record that this body, if we so agree, unanimously supported that. And then you could make another motion to actually change the actual language. But I don't disagree with Commissioner Hilding that it would be nice to have that on the record, that this body absolutely opposes anybody being able to avoid having an in-person meeting.
So moved.
There's a motion, we're going to follow through. There's a motion on the floor that, that we have a motion that we oppose the changes to holding eliminating an in-person meeting. So as a commission, we oppose the request to hold virtual meetings instead of in-person meetings.
And we're saying neighborhood meetings, just to
Neighborhood
clarify.
meetings, yeah.
Because the
neighborhood
public
meetings.
hearing piece is still, okay.
Yeah. For the individual neighborhood meetings, and that's Exhibit 5, Item C. So
So that sounded like a motion.
it sounded like a motion. Is there a second?
I second that.
Commissioner Birch, Commissioner Brown both seconded it. Any other discussion?
Madam Chair, can I propose a friendly amendment to that motion?
Okay,
Can we possibly add under extenuating circumstances to the end of that? Because I just worry that if we have that motion with that language, and again, something like COVID-20 happens or some other thing that prevents in-person gatherings, then again, there's no alternative if we say you can only have in-person. Because with that language, to me, the way I read it is that there is no other option available besides in-person. And I just think having that under extenuating circumstances up to the discretion of, staff or someone, I think it allows that little bit of flexibility just in case.
so Commissioner Exton wants some flexibility. What comments do we have about that?
I would say that we did okay the last time around with legal requirements for in-person meetings and the governor suspending that requirement. So I would think if there's another emergency, God forbid, that would be understood and permitted. What we're saying doesn't have the force of law. What we're doing is simply communicating something to the County Board of Commissioners that we feel very strongly about in-person meetings,
For neighborhood meetings.
for neighborhood meetings.
Is there somebody that wants to second that motion or have other comments?
Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying. I just think it's hard to legislate the extenuating circumstances.
Yeah,
So
I
everybody's
understand
going to
that.
have their own opinion. And so I think that when these really weird things happen, there's enough people that are prompting the governor, or there'll be ways that we'll be able to get around it. So I'm not going to second your motion, your amendment.
That's fine.
Is there anybody else that wanted to second the amendment? But I like the discussion, so that's good. And that's one of the things I really appreciate is this group of commissioners does have a lot of lively discussions and engagements, so we can't be not engaged. What other comments do we have before we vote?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So it's, so I'm certainly concerned with both, I'd say extremes versus option A or option B, which is in-person only or virtual only. I definitely think that, like we stated before, that in-person is important. However, not providing the virtual option, I think, as we've discussed as well, is a little short-sighted in the sense that there are people who would only be able to attend virtually. And I think that we have seen, just speaking from my personal experience, my one virtual neighborhood meeting that I've attended during this last year, which affected me personally, it was a mess because it was online only. There was the only face that you saw was the applicant or the developer, and everybody was trying to type their comments and concerns into a chat, and they would do their best to try and address them, and it was a mess. So, I think in the same tune, it does provide access to those that might be on the road or out of town or unable to make it to where the meeting is being held.
So
So-
what we were trying to do was break this into parts.
Yeah.
The first one is, do we all agree that in-person meetings should be required? We were then going to discuss virtual meetings as an option, and so that's the next thing to talk. The problem is there's a lot of issues here. So the first question is just, is everybody in agreement that in-person meetings should be required? And then after we've discussed that, we discuss should
This is the next one, yeah.
virtual be available as an option.
So we're baby stepping it.
So
We're
we're doing.
voting on the
We're
first-
voting on the first
Okay.
thing
The
is
first thing
whether or
that we
not.
all
And then,
oppose.
yeah, and then we can work through the other ones. So any other discussions about the motion that we want to, that we want to send the message, or that we want to have it on the record that this group opposes any requirements to provide the applicant the option to not hold an in-person meeting. Did I say that right yet?
Rather than oppose, how about we support the requirement of an in-person?
There we go. That's a better way to put it. We support the requirement of, it's whatever Commissioner Hilding's motion was, but we support the requirement that there be an in-person meeting in order to preserve access to neighbors to the process, the democratic process.
In the process too, the neighborhood meeting it's a little more than a check-the-box meeting, but it's just the start. The applicant has to do that before they submit their application. And then there's a hearing like this, so there are other points, and then at that point, they can either write a letter, email, send a representative. There are other other situations where they're able to have their voice heard. So the neighborhood meeting is just that one small step, and I agree that it should be in person, virtue as an option when, if the applicant has the capability to do that. But we're not going to cover 100% of the people who are concerned about that particular item. But there are other opportunities for them to participate. And we shouldn't forget that and get stuck on this one point, get stuck in a silo.
I think that's good. Any other comments? Are we ready to vote? So I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say aye. So let the record reflect that all 7 commissioners want the applicant to have in-person neighborhood meetings. So now let's talk about what our recommendation is for virtual meetings.
I think that back to Commissioner Birch's statement was very clean, and I know you may not remember exactly how you worded it, but it was well worded. So I'm sure we can go back and look at that, but I think we, look at using that verbiage as, I think we're all in agreement to that, where you're making it required to have in-person, but then giving the option of having I know there's some
The virtual meeting
virtual meeting,
at the same time.
yeah, simultaneously. So however he worded it that first time, that's what I think we're all in agreement to,
So we're
right?
all, I'm going to say that there's a motion on the table that Commissioner Birch presented that talked about the meetings being held in person and there being an option for a virtual meeting at the same time.
Simultaneously, correct.
So is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
There's a second. And any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So, if I look at the rest of the proposed changes, are we in agreement with the rest of do we want to have a motion on the rest of the items with the exception of the issue on the neighborhood meetings? So is there a statement that we recommend that the rest of the procedural things be passed with the exception of the neighborhood meetings?
Can I have a moment to find the
Yeah,
language?
yeah.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Commissioners, I'm happy to read that language to you. It's found in the June 10th memo. It's a modification to 8-70-1, the purpose. And I'll read the entire statement and then let you know when things are underlined for the change. So the purpose of this article shall be to provide a procedure by which the board or the commission shall conduct hearings, and this is the addition underlined, that may be conducted in person and/or by virtual means, And then that was the only underlined part, and then back to the original language. In land use, which by federal, state, or county law require the receipt of evidence, whether testimony, documents, or otherwise, and a response from the board in the form of a written decision or recommendation from the commission based on the record. So again, the language added is that may be conducted in person and or by virtual means, which again allows for the in-person simultaneous virtual situation that we're experiencing now, as well as if we're back to full-blown pandemic and no public meetings are allowed, 100% virtual.
So what comments do the commissioners have about the rest of the discussion?
That is at the bottom of page 10 of the June 10th packet for anyone who hasn't.
So I'm looking at the amended ordinance with the language struck through and so forth. So you have 87A3 neighborhood meetings. And basically what we dealt with by motion was subsection C. That's what we've just finished talking about. And such meetings may be held in person or virtually remotely at the discretion of the applicant. So that's what we just finished dealing with. So what else is there to deal with?
If you go down below that, Commissioner Hilding, there's a subsequent section that we're amending, which is at 8-70-1, the purpose. It's again on page 10 of that PDF from June 10th.
Okay.
Is where you'll see that underlined language.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that language. I don't know if, are we in discussion right now?
We're in discussion right now.
Okay.
So is there anything, I mean, we've talked about the one issue that we are really concerned about, which is the neighborhood meetings, but the rest of it, I don't know that we have anything that we are in opposition of, and we support the staff's recommendation.
Yeah. Agreed.
I guess from my perspective, the important thing is that we preserve the ability for the public to interact in the process. And if that's the neighborhood meeting, that's really, really important. And then this hearing should have multiple ways for people to interact in this meeting. So that's what our perspective is that we want to preserve multiple ways for people to interact in the public process. So I think we would need
This is another motion.
another motion,
To approve this 870 purpose statement. Is that what we're looking for?
a motion that approves the other changes that don't involve the neighborhood meetings.
Okay.
So the changes that involve the land use hearings, so that's section 2.
So I'll motion to approve the other portions of the statement other than the neighborhood meetings already previously discussed.
So it's been moved that we, the rest of the package is, we can recommend the rest of the package with the exception of the comments regarding the neighborhood meetings that we carved out. And it looks like people are looking, so do you guys need a few more minutes to look at this?
Do we need to keep 2A, I'm sorry, C2A, the underlying part, so that it's, if meetings are to be conducted by remote virtual means. So that's kind of indicating you can do your meeting.
Madam Chair.
So I think C, kind of eliminate C from this. So the C part is already been dealt with on the other two motions.
Okay.
And so we're just talking about the, kind of the rest of it. And there aren't that many, I mean, to me, there aren't that many changes because the changes are underlined.
I wonder if Commissioner Wickstrom would feel more comfortable if that language said if a neighborhood meeting is allowed to be conducted by remote virtual means.
That would be, yeah, that would clarify that a little more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Madam Chair.
So in item 2,
Right.
2A.
is 2A, if a neighborhood meeting is to be, is allowed to be, so that would be a change there. So Commissioner Brown, I think your motion is on the plate.
Yeah, because that 2A was, that was pertained to in the previous motion, right? This is, or we have to have a separate motion for that?
We
section
probably
two?
have a second.
We referred to all neighborhood meetings that we were in person with the
Yeah.
option of that. So I think this is just reiterating what we already said, right?
Well, I think the deal is that we didn't deal with this particular question. What they're saying is there needs to be sufficient information. So I think that's a good idea to have in there. We just want to add, if a neighborhood meeting is allowed to be conducted by remote virtual means, any required notices. So that language would need to be trued up so that it isn't in conflict with the C language. So we would just instruct the staff to
Madam Chair.
clean that up, so. Commissioner Brown, do you want to withdraw your motion?
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I was under the impression that we just addressed 8-7A-3 with the previous motion, and that we were making a motion regarding section 2 at the bottom of that second page of Exhibit 5, and going to vote on the purpose 8-7E-1 regarding this hearing being allowed to do virtual and/or in person.
And
Or, excuse me, I had that
Yeah.
backward, in person and/or by virtual means.
And I think I was too,
Okay.
until I heard the comments from Commissioner Wickstrom about the other thing. So I'm confused with you, but we've got this
Maybe a
whole rest
third
of the thing,
motion?
we need to deal with the changes that are being proposed in the 2. And so we probably should deal with the changes that are proposed in section 2, and then the changes that are proposed in section C2. So it looks like there's 2 more chunks that we need to give some advice on.
Madam Chair, not to interrupt the motion, but perhaps the use of the word also, if a neighborhood meeting is also to be conducted, because I think what we've said above is in-person has to happen. You may also do it virtually, and then down below, if a neighborhood meeting is also to be conducted, that would essentially outline the way you have to do that. So I think you could insert the word also potentially if that's.
Okay. So is
That's-
there
that's
somebody that
fine with
wants
me.
to have a motion that we agree with that language?
I'll attempt a motion.
Okay.
Madam Chair. And first of all, this is very difficult. I mean, whoever drafted this was sitting down at a desk and didn't have 6 different people chiming in, and, you know, it's legislating this way is very difficult. So I'm just saying that for what it's worth. My motion is that with regard to the balance of the language in section 8-7A-3, the language is acceptable with the one additional change that section 2A should read as follows: if a neighborhood meeting is also to be conducted by remote virtual means.
Thank you very much. Great
second.
motion. And there's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Commissioner Hilding. Appreciate that. Now, I think I'm going to go to Commissioner Brown, and we're at the 8-7E-1 purpose, which was your original motion from before.
Yeah, I'll motion for, that we approve the portion, the remainder of the statement, including 8-7E1 purpose statement, with the exception of obviously previously stated neighborhood meeting content that we discussed.
So is there a second?
Second.
So first moved and seconded. Any discussions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You guys did a great job. Is it out of line for us to send a, like personally, if I wanted to send a letter to the commissioners is it okay to do that as a personal?
Madam Chair, sure. If you'd like to, if the commission wants to provide testimony on the application in that form, I don't think there's anything that would prohibit you from doing that if you wanted to write a joint letter or something.
I'm just going to be very curious about how they're going to deal with this. And they're very capable, and we probably haven't said anything here that hasn't occurred to them. But I think it's a very important decision.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, if there is interest, please submit that letter. We'll make it part of the packet. And, again, we will do our best to capture this conversation in our memo. That's our responsibility to you in forwarding your recommendations. So we will do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Birch has a comment.
One of Commissioner Exton's concerns, I think, could be addressed if staff at every opportunity advises applicants that it would be within their interest and preferable if they could make access to the public meetings available virtually. If that is communicated frequently enough, pretty soon that will be the standard, and anybody that can do it will do it.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I think there are some things that don't exist in the ordinance that are best practices that can be shared in that regard, so.
I think that's a really good point. Okay, do you want to talk to us about things that happened? Or,
I think you have the minutes first.
Minutes, yeah.
And then we can go over that board meeting from last night.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
since I was not in attendance for the last meeting, I will be abstaining from the vote on these minutes.
so thank you very much. We'll have one person abstaining.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
The
we're
minutes
approving-
was June 10th, 2021?
There was a correction. We're voting to approve the minutes, is that?
Yeah.
Let me pull them up. Shoot.
I noticed how many so we must have taken, did we use a voice capturing software to collect the minutes?
Oh,
YouTube does provide closed captioning, so this was taken directly from your words.
Yeah. I'm just laughing because I had a lot of ums in there. And so-
That's what I remember. Did I really talk like that?
Minutes, oh, here we go, okay.
I know, I say like a lot.
Night, thank you for your work on this.
I appreciate the discussion, it's great.
Mr. Birch, Commissioner Birch, used the word, in the minutes it says attendee, and I think he meant applicant, and I'm trying to find it. It was during the discussion of this same issue last time around.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hilding, when I did do the minutes, I did catch that, and I listened to the YouTube recording 3 times to verify that Commissioner Birch did say attendee. I believe he did mean to say applicant, but because he said attendee, that's what I wrote in the notes.
But he never misspeaks. He's like me that way.
Thank you for your diligence.
Yes, thank you.
So we appreciate that. Any other comments by the minutes, or is there a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve minutes.
Commissioner Brown has moved to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, a second. Do you guys want more time? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And we do appreciate the minute taking, so and we know that that's a hard job.
I've noticed you've started including and too. Something for me to work on.
That's what I said, is I have a lot of work to do. Okay, now do you want to share with us the Board of County Commissioners meeting?
Fair Commissioners, busy night last night. Several items were heard by the board. I'll just run through these real quick. First was a time extension for a cell tower in the Cuna area, Deer Flat Road. That was approved with a 1-year extension and the need for a new propagation study if they have to extend beyond that. So ultimately tabled to the next staff meeting to revise those findings, but essentially tabled and approved for that time extension on that cell tower. There was an approval of a variance for an accessory structure in the front yard of a property. It was an existing structure that was used for animal storage, and ultimately the board approved that one. There was a text amendment for Title IX of Ada County Code associated with Meridian's, our area of city impact with agreement with Meridian regarding their comprehensive plan and a few other, gosh, I gotta figure out the sweet spot with this microphone. As well as a few of the other plans that they've recently adopted, such as like their pathways plan and things like that. So that was another item approved. They also amended their boundaries of that area of city impact adjustment, and the receiving cities surrounding that accepted all of those changes. So that was approved. I'll just cut to the chase. Everything was approved, nothing denied last night. Subdivision for 26 lots and 4 common lots. This is in the Boise area of impact. That was approved. We had a development agreement master modification and a master site plan modification for a new drive-through restaurant on 5 Mile that was approved. There were some minor modifications that triggered the need for that to go to a hearing, and the fact that it was a development agreement that was modified. There was a zoning ordinance map amendment in the Cuna area to rezone 11.5 acres from RR to RUT, and a request for a 2-lot subdivision. That was also approved. There was, and you guys recommended approval on that one, obviously. I'll try to point out the things that you recommend approval on. Same with the previous subdivision, which was in the Boise area. There was a variance for an accessory structure. And this was for, again, larger than 1,500 square feet. I believe those were the only aspects of it that required the variance. That was ultimately approved. They did table it for revised findings because we were originally recommending denial. There was this is the Element Sky subdivision, one that you guys spent a lot of time on a month or two ago. The project on Linder Road that Stacy Arrington kind of used as an example for some of the ACHD review. That was ultimately approved. A lot of discussion had occurred between the developer and the property owner to the east, which had been, I'd say, a bulk of the things that you heard in terms of how to resolve that easement and other things. So staff had worked closely with the two groups to try to bring them together. They ultimately did and came together anyways in terms of how that's going to move forward. And the board approved that zone change and the subdivision. Let's see, there was another zone change and a development agreement in the master site plan for a rezone from RUT to M1. This is in the Meridian area for a contractor's yard and storage facility. That was approved. It was tabled for some modifications on the at the request of the applicant to remove some screening requirements, which the board agreed with. So that was ultimately approved as well, but tabled to our next meeting to adopt those revised findings. And then finally, there was a variance for a secondary dwelling and an attached garage. It's required a variance to the square footage requirement as well as being located in the front setback. And ultimately, despite us recommending denial, was ultimately approved and tabled so that we could revise those findings. So those were the items from our meeting last night with the board. If you have any questions, let me know.
Any questions?
Did any of the residents show up for the property on Linder?
For Element Sky, we did not have anyone in attendance for that meeting. It was the applicant only. Again, there were lots of conversations that happened between P&Z and the board, particularly with the property owner to the east, to resolve, to basically figure out how they move forward with that easement, which is kind of a unique easement and how it's written and how it can be relocated. But
Nobody from that adjacent neighborhood.
yeah, we did not have anybody from the adjacent neighborhood opposing the project. So.
I'm curious, that raises a question for me too. I just wonder how often people do show up. The two kind of controversial ones that I remember, from the past few months, there was the issue of the folks that wanted to store pesticides down in the residential area, and that was appealed. Did anybody show up for that? And then there was the issue of people that wanted to have the wine tasting and whatnot. That was appealed. That was out there by Hillsdale Estates on the road going down to Emmett. And so I'm curious if anybody showed up for that one too.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Dude DeWalt winery. There were many in attendance for the Dude DeWalt hearing. That was a longer hearing for sure, ultimately approved. I think as I recalled or
With
recap.
variations.
Yeah, with changes to how they locate structures and things like that. The appeal for the pest control business has not gone to hearing yet. So, I mean, I would imagine the same people that opposed it before would likely make it to that hearing as well. They're not proposing any changes to their project, but yeah, we'll let you know as soon as that actually makes it to hearing. I think Diana Sanders has that one, and I think it goes next month, so.
And then of the people that wanted to do the sign out on Heisman Road or whatever it was, have they just gone away?
Is that near the interchange?
Yeah.
I think we have,
Pardon? Yeah, yeah.
well, that certainly is not happening now. There is an application recently submitted. Don't want to give you too many details because you haven't had a chance to hear it yet, but there is a new use proposed there, and it's not a big sign. That's about the only information I can give you, but that will be brought to you, I believe, next month is the proposal for that property.
Okay, any other questions from the commissioners? Interesting things happening in Ada County.
Yeah.
So, okay, hearing that there's no more business, we're gonna close the meeting, so. Do I need to do a vote on that, or do I just say it's closed? Thumbs up, we're all closed, okay, we're good. Nobody opposed, unanimous consent.